ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, going head-to-head, is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. And then from between 4 and 6, Nigel will stay here and I'll be joined by broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. A man has been charged after allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final which appeared to have an offensive reference to the Hillsborough disaster. 33-year-old James White from Warwickshire has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He's expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court next week. 97 Liverpool fans died in 1989 at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. Indian authorities say a signal problem was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. That's as the death toll has now been revised down to 275 people. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passing train. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who faces re-election next year, says those found guilty will be punished. The Immigration Minister has told GB News it's wrong for migrants to demand better hotel accommodation while waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. It's after a protest was sparked in London by migrants being asked to sleep 4 to a room. Speaking to Camilla Tominey, Robert Jenrick said the government will never put their interests above the British public. He also said that sharing hotel rooms is necessary to get value for taxpayers' money.
Remember, these are migrants who have said they are destitute. They've said that they have absolutely nowhere to stay, no friends, no family, no money, and the taxpayer is stepping up and providing them with good quality accommodation and board and lodgings. And so, I think those migrants are wrong to protest and say that they deserve to have single bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms and so on. And I'm pleased to see that common sense seems to have prevailed in this case.
A Labour MP has told GB News that victims are too scared to complain about sexual predators in Parliament. Charlotte Nichols told Camilla Tominey that harassment is baked into every single part of how Westminster operates. She also accused the Labour Party of choosing not to act on concerns raised about a number of colleagues over a very long period. Her comments come after she revealed being handed a list of 30 MPs that she should avoid when she first became an MP.
It's happened to me in meetings during the middle of the working day. I've had colleagues do things like inappropriate touching, their hand on your leg or on your back, or making comments towards you. And I'm someone that, as I said, within the hierarchy of Westminster, is relatively protected by virtue of being an MP. So how much worse it must be if you're someone who has less power in the institution, where you're more likely to experience it and even less able to speak out when it happens.
The Prime Minister is stressing the importance of a close and candid relationship with the US President ahead of his visit to the White House next week. Rishi Sunak is expected to attend a baseball game in Washington, D.C. prior to talks with Joe Biden. He'll also be meeting business executives in an attempt to build closer economic ties between the two countries. More than 2,600 NHS staff in Scotland have taken time off work due to long COVID, with some off sick for more than 2 years. That's according to Freedom of Information requests by the Scottish Liberal Democrats. The Scottish Government says it's investing £10 million into the long COVID support fund. The Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims that around 140 published articles contained information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. Royal correspondent Michael Cole says it will be very unusual to see a royal on the witness stand.
A royal prince going into the witness box to give evidence in a very contentious case against Mirror Group newspapers. That hasn't happened ever since the 19th century. It is unprecedented. I mean, there's nothing in the British Constitution that says a royal prince cannot give evidence or cannot be called to be a witness.
And 4 children have died, and a man is missing in Canada after they were swept into a river in Quebec. Police say the group were fishing when the incident happened. The children, who were all over the age of 10, were found unresponsive on the shore. 6 other people have been rescued. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, so let's get straight back to Nana.
Hello, welcome. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into the debates in the next hour, let me introduce you to my panel. They're going head-to-head. Joining me, senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also member of Reform and former MEP Ben Habib. They'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds coming up today. Asylum seekers were seen protesting on the street because they had to share rooms at the Pimlico Comfort Inn. I actually want to laugh. I can't quite believe this. One of the migrants said that they were being treated like animals, in Pimlico? And the hotel has since agreed to a maximum of only 2 migrants sharing a room rather than 4. Then we're moving on to one of Labour and Just Stop Oil's biggest donors, Dale Vince. I actually got to speak to him yesterday. He's plotting the rollout of an eco-curriculum in schools. Should we be allowed to climate activism and really that sort of thing dictating what gets taught to our children? Is it the right way forward? And then, is the UK doing enough to support Zelensky? Now, the Ukrainian president stated that his country was ready to launch its much-vaunted counter-offensive, but one of his top advisors contradicted him only days later. He stated that Kyiv still lacks sufficient weapons and ammunition to push out the Russians and take back the country. The comments have many asking if Britain is doing enough to support them. That's all coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing, as ever, in the usual way. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So let's go head to head. Right, so let's start with our first topic of conversation. And this week, we saw migrants barricade their hotel accommodation in central London because they said the rooms were unsafe. Asylum seekers were seen protesting on the street because they had to share rooms at the Pimlico Comfort Inn, and one of the migrants said that they were being treated like animals. The hotel has agreed to reduce the capacity to just 2 rather than 4. So let's welcome again to my head-to-headers, senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also member of Reform and former MEP Ben Habib. Well, I'm going to start with, the outrage will be on the right. Let's go to the left. Nigel Nelson.
OK, I'm not outraged.
At all, are you?
The thing about this one is that even Robert Jenner, the immigration minister, seems to have no idea what's really going on. So
that's not a first, Nigel.
That's probably not the first time. But on the basis of that, according to reports, these people were asked to sleep in a 2-metre room, 4 of them where there are only 2 bunk beds. That is not acceptable. The hotel has obviously since changed that, and so only 2 people will sleep in the room. Asylum seekers, whoever they are, obviously it's a lot better than a Calais camp, wherever they end up. They should be treated with dignity and humanely, and quite clearly in this situation that wasn't happening.
Well, what about refugee camps then? Because refugee camps are all over the world and some of them are in tents and all that kind of thing. That seems acceptable. These guys are in a hotel in one of the most expensive parts of London, Pimlico, and the conditions, they said that the only reason they went back in was because they were told that if they didn't, then they would stop their food and money because, frankly, it's very generous for them to even...
Well, you couldn't do that, really. I mean,
but they were told that.
I know they were told that, yeah, but I mean, the idea of leaving them on the streets, that's even worse.
They themselves out. They didn't want to go in.
Well, I mean, the whole thing was they were making a protest, that the protest seems to have solved the immediate problem, which was trying to put 4 of them into a room. Now they've agreed that 2 of them can share, which seems to be not unreasonable. Also, Westminster City Council didn't know anything about it. So all this was happening, whereas they may have been able to help, but couldn't, because no one actually told them.
Ben.
Well, you say, Nigel, quite emphatically, if I may challenge you on it, that, it's clearly unacceptable that 4 people sleep in a room, but there are lots of people sleeping rough in London. You see them all the time. Why is it that this group of people get better attention? Is there something in the European Convention of Human Rights that requires no more than 2 to a room? Is there something in building regulations or in health and safety regulations that says there can't be more than 2 to a room? And why are they given housing in the first place? In France, where where the majority of these people came from, they're just in camps, they're in tents, like Nana said. So
how come that's
how come that's acceptable? But once they come to the...
It's not acceptable the way that France is treated.
There's no outrage. There's no real outrage. When they come here, there seems to be some big outrage.
But it's not a breach of their human rights or anything to be required to share a room with 3 other people in Pimlico.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. I cannot afford even a small little studio flat or even a room in Pimlico.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
I think we should take Pimlico out of the equation. They were there because that was where
but that's probably why they were 4 to a room, because it's £150 a night to be in central London.
Yes, but I'm sure they'd be quite happy to be in St Albans or Bradford or somewhere else. Somewhere else where they could have been taken. So Pimlico happened to be where... they came from somewhere else in the first place.
They've been accommodated and given food and shelter, which is ultimately what they wanted.
Yeah, but we're still talking about treating people reasonably, and I don't think that squashing 4 of them, if this is true,
reasonable,
into a 2-metre room with 2 bunk beds that 4 people have to share, that is not treating people reasonably.
But I think this goes to the heart of the problem, because if you look at the quality of lives these people are afforded in France, they are in tents. They're not looked after. They don't get access to the National Health Service or whatever the French equivalent is. They don't get given cash. And, they know that the minute they make it to entering British territorial waters, they will have warm blanket put round them. They'll be put onto a border force boat, brought back to UK shores, put in a 3-star hotel in prime central London, given food, free food, given money, given free dental care, given access to the NHS, the economic pull towards the UK must be irresistible. And, you know, the point is, and Nigel, you're going to jump up and down, no doubt, in horror about what I'm about to say, but the point is they are economic migrants. The minute they're in France, they're safe, their human rights are assured. When they're coming here to better themselves, and the complaints that they're making about Pimlico evidence that it's all about increasing the quality of their own lives in coming across the channel.
But we don't know they're economic migrants. What they are is asylum seekers, and until they're
But they are. They're coming from France.
Yeah, I know, but...
There's no suggestion they're not safe in France, is there?
No, but the problem with France is we haven't got a returns agreement with France. So an awful lot of these people are coming here, A, because they speak English, that's why this is our destination, B, because they might have relatives or friends here. So they end up in Calais with the express intention of crossing the Channel to get to Britain. At this stage, they're still asylum seekers and have every legal right to cross the Channel.
But that's fair enough.
They don't have a legal right to cross the Channel.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't. And can I asked your producer to put a screenshot up for me. I don't know whether... I want to debug that myth.
OK.
So this is... Everyone says under international law they're entitled to come in. So I just want all viewers to read this very carefully. This is Article 33 from the UN Convention of the Laws of the Sea. So this is international law about who is and isn't allowed to come into our territorial waters. And it says, quite clearly, in a zone contiguous to its territorial sea, described as a contiguous zone, the coastal states, that's the United Kingdom, may exercise the control necessary to prevent infringement of its customs, fiscal, immigration, or sanitary laws and regulations within its territory or territorial waters. We have international law firmly on our side in order to intercept these boats as they enter our territorial water and turn them around to France, and we don't do it.
You're absolutely right that what is illegal is to land in Britain without any travel documents. That is trumped, again, under the same convention, by being an asylum seeker. An asylum seeker can...
But you can only be an asylum seeker once you're on British
Exactly,
soil.
And that's what we have to change.
And so we've got to stop them in the Channel. We've got to move away from our illegal migration policy being based on one of deterrence, which is what Suella Braverman and Jenrick go on about. Clearly, it's not about deterrence because they get put up in 3-star hotels in Pimlico. We've got to move away from that and understand we have all the international law on our side to stop them in the Channel, to use border force, as the name suggests, as a force to protect the border, to use a navy if necessary.
So how do you stop them in the Channel?
Well, you produce a dedicated force that's capable of intercepting these dinghies,
right,
and you do not allow them to cross into our water.
Then what do you do with them? Do you just leave them in the middle of the Channel?
Well, you force them to...
Here we go again. This is that ridiculous thing where you go, no, because normally what would happen is would they board your boat, so they come on your boat, and then the boat turns around and takes them back to the UK. What you do...
Yeah, go on.
Let me finish. So this is not... Because it'll be like, you want people to die at sea. No, actually, I'd rather people didn't get on the boat in the first place, and then they would have no risk of death. But once they're on your boat, you take their boat, tow it to your boat, and you take it back to France. Everybody's safe. Everybody does it easily. That's done.
Right, OK. It's not France's problem.
It is France's problem.
No, it's not. They pass through France in the same way they've passed through a number of other countries.
But they're safe in France. They've got no right to enter our territorial waters.
Yes, they have every right because they're asylum seekers.
But we just read the UN Convention of Laws of the Sea.
Which is trumped by the fact they're an asylum seeker.
No, it's not.
If you're just simply an immigrant... and you come here,
it's not nice.
You are breaking the law if you arrive on British soil without travel documents. That's the illegal part.
You can't seek asylum until you have a right to seek it. No. You don't have that right until you're part of the European Convention of Human Rights on our territory. That's when you get that benefit.
Every refugee starts out as an asylum seeker, although I appreciate not every asylum seeker is a refugee. So under the UN Convention, the refugee has a right to try and seek safety wherever they can.
They don't have a right to illegally enter our waters.
But it's not illegal.
It is illegal.
Not if you're an asylum seeker.
No, but they're not an asylum seeker.
But they're an asylum seeker. They haven't been granted asylum.
But then still...
No, they're not. At the point that they're seeking to enter our territory, it's a fine but very important point. Well, they are not asylum seekers because they haven't made an application for asylum because they're not on British soil yet.
Well, at which point they're a refugee, and a refugee in this case...
No, they're not refugees. They're migrants seeking to illegally enter the United Kingdom.
Because they've come from a...
They're coming from France.
Yeah, but we haven't got a returns agreement with France, so we can actually send them back, which is what we lost through Brexit.
No, we didn't. No. I'm not going to have that, Nigel. As much as I like you, I'm not going to tolerate that. There's something called the Dublin Agreement. That's what you're referring to.
I am referring to that,
Under the Dublin Agreement, for the 5 years prior to Brexit, there was a net 36 people returned to Europe. The Dublin Agreement didn't work. It's a non-workable agreement. We have to develop the most humanitarian thing is for these people to know they will not be allowed to enter UK territorial water. And if they know that and understand it, they won't make the journey. That's what we've got to do.
Well, Nigel, I mean, look, it's going to save everybody a lot of money, and it'll probably save lives if people didn't get on the boats in the first place.
I would agree with that. Well, I think we'd all agree with that one.
Well, that's the whole policy. If they don't think that they're going to get into the country via the boats...
Well, look what's happened to Albanians.
And they know that they're going to be...
Albanians have a returns agreement, and they don't come here anymore.
Yeah, well, but that's because we know that that's a safe country. There's no war. There's nothing they're fleeing from there.
Like France.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we don't have a returns agreement with.
But that's irrelevant because we did literally 36 people.
But if you would go the other direction, we would, if they were leaving our shores to go to France, and France adopted what both of you are suggesting, we wouldn't take them back here.
That's very hard.
So Nigel, that's
nobody is leaving this country to go back to France.
And why? Why are they?
They get a hotel, they can complain, and then they get what they want.
Hypothetical but relevant.
Well, that's that. Listen, stay with us. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll be discussing Just Stop Oil's biggest donor, Dale Vinsel. It's Dale Vince, isn't it? With GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and a member of Reform and former MEP, Ben Habib. They'll be going head-to-head. Keep your thoughts coming at gbnews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello. Good afternoon. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 23 minutes after 3 o'clock. Now, we were discussing the situation with the immigration and the fact that a load of migrants, they're migrants on asylum seekers, they're seeking asylum, but they're currently staying in a hotel in Pimlico. They complained because there were 4 in a room rather than 2. So let's see what you've been saying about that. Christine says, our veterans are sleeping in the streets. Wendy says, if they don't like it, return to France. Wendy, as we said, no one's going back to France because they wouldn't get what they have here. Andy says, dear Nana, the Pimlico immigrant strike is indefensible. Well, keep those thoughts coming. We love to hear them. Right, let's move on to this one. And actually, yesterday, I got a chance to speak to Dale Vince. He's one of Labour and Just Stop Oil's biggest donors. He's plotting to roll out an eco-curriculum across 12,000 UK schools after successful trials across the country. Now, Dale is the founder of green energy company Ecotricity, and it's valued around about £100 million. And he's actually given about 1.5 million to the Labour Party over the past 10 years, as well as recently donating 170,000 to Just Stop Oil. Now, what do you think? Should children be taught about focusing on the energies that we use and the way that we travel, what we eat and the importance of making room for nature? And that's according to the plan set out in the annual report of Mr Vince's charitable donation. So is it right for Just Stop Oil donors to be releasing an eco-curriculum into our schools? Although, to be fair to him, he does live by what he says. But let's see what my panel make of that. They're going head-to-head. Joining me, senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also member of Reform and former MEP Ben Habib. Who do we start with? No, I thought we'd do Ben to start.
OK, so, I mean, Dale Vince isn't here to defend himself.
No, but he's great. I spoke to him yesterday. Yeah. With all respect to him.
And it would be good if you put me right on anything I might say that's, not accurate. So I had a look at Ecotricity this morning, just to try and understand what it is he does. One of the things Ecotricity produces, is vegan gas. Have you ever heard of vegan gas?
Because they make it out of grass, isn't that?
So they make it out of grass. And the theory behind it is that you decompose grass, you create methane, exactly the same kind of methane you would get out of the ground, and you then burn it and you put the same amount of carbon in the air. But, of course, because it came from grass...
renewable. So
as long as you can plant the same amount of grass, you come back to the same... But that's the same principle of burning trees. It may take slightly longer to burn trees, but if you're planting forests as fast as you're cutting them, you have the same net outcome. And I think...
But it takes longer to release...
It takes longer. Of course it takes longer.
Outcome, which is a problem.
Of course it takes longer. But you are still burning methane. It may be vegan, and it may come in all the trappings of something that is approved by the Islington intellectual elite. But the net result is the same. And you're not seeking to transition people off the use of methane when you're producing methane. You're inculcating the same habits, the same usage patterns that you would have. What I don't understand about the whole eco drive is why we're not using fossil fuels produced at home more, to a greater extent. So, for example, Keir Starmer, no doubt influenced by Dale Vince, wants to cease issuing any new licences for North Sea oil and gas extraction.
To be fair, both parties are sort of going along that.
And at the moment, there's no breaking off using gas. Gas is a fundamental component of how we heat our homes in this country and how industry is powered. And we've got the idiotic situation of not using our own gas and importing liquefied natural gas from the US at vast cost, vast additional carbon footprint to the UK. It's an absolute absurdity.
Well, Dale's point would be, and he's not here to defend himself, but I suspect he would say that what it is renewable. So we wouldn't have that situation if we were making our own...
But everything is renewable. Yeah, but everything's renewable.
I hear you, but the footprint, the carbon footprint that you would have by the other extraction, so the fossil fuels, and getting them for other places, and liquefied gas is far greater, rather than if you could actually regenerate your own using grass that you could grow yourself. And also, there's the controlling of the price as well. So there's that side of it.
But if you shut down North Sea gas and you shunned American liquefied natural gas, there's no amount of vegan gas that would power the United... You just can't produce it.
Well, no, I'm with you on that. And I'm somebody who doesn't believe that you should stop the production of fossil fuel anyway, but just to present the other side. But, Nigel, what do you think about this? Where's your head on?
Well, I think that Ben perhaps should take the first lesson at the schools about eco-education on the basis.
Oh, that's patronising.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is that what we're talking about is whether or not it's right for him to be going into schools and launching his own curriculum there. Now, I don't know how much the curriculum is actually his. Seems to me that, yes, very much so, that children ought to learn about saving energy, about climate change, about global warming, about the risks that they are facing. They're the next generation, after all, who are going to be affected more by it than, say, we are. And as far as if a charitable organisation which he runs wants to fund this, great, that is fantastic. As long as he doesn't have any veto over what is being taught and the teachers look through the material themselves and they're quite happy teaching that to the children.
But to be honest, I respect teachers, but with regard to that, what would they know in terms of that? If we say that, the only worry I have is something that I think is quite important, that he does have a huge vested interest, doesn't he?
He does.
He's got a wind farm company, so he produces wind farms. In fact, I know he put up one of the first ever wind farms in this country. He also has, he's got a vegan food company as well. I mean, that could be influencing the diet of some of those schools. He's also, he's also got his own eco-electricity company. So I'm thinking, my problem with that is that he is creating something and perhaps influencing a curriculum.
He's actually creating...
He's somebody who is an entrepreneur. He's a businessman. He's a businessman.
Yeah, I mean...
He's creating his own market.
Yeah, but I mean, the foundation schools, for instance, are run by business people. There are an awful lot of people with vested interests who also have an interest in education. I think you treat this for what it is, which is actually providing some financial support so kids can learn about climate change and what they can do about it.
Isn't it more sinister than that, Nigel? Isn't it about, enforcing his views and the kind of Just Stop Oil's extreme version of how we manage the planet?
But that's my point about he shouldn't have any kind of veto.
But of course he will, won't he? He's the one going around the school.
Well, no. I mean, it's down to the teacher and ultimately the head teacher in a school to decide what children are taught, and overall the government, which sets the national curriculum.
Well, that's the point, though. If the government set the national curriculum and he is also donating money to the Labour Party, should we be looking at that?
His fingers are in far too many pies.
There's too much going on, isn't there? If this was the Tory Party, you'd be saying, hang on a minute, remember the COVID situation where they were giving contracts allegedly to their friends and people who they knew, and so on and so forth. This could smell a little bit of that, couldn't it? I mean, as much as I respect Dale Vince, I spoke to him the other day, I think he's an incredible business person, but I'm thinking that if a business person's coming in to talk to schools, it could feel like a level of indoctrination, seeing as that person has wind farms, they have a company for charging points.
You can say the same about academies. I mean, academies work in the same way. No, but they're able to actually work outside the system.
But they're not plugging their own agenda. People who support academies come from all walks of life, all sorts of different...
But you would accept that it's business people.
Yeah, but they're not promoting... This guy's explicitly promoting a theory, an agenda which creates a market for his product.
But without seeing the material that he's actually producing, he's not promoting his products. This is not a sales exercise.
But he is automatically doing it.
Do you not think that would feel almost like... it is kind of like a sales exercise. It's like a soft sell, admittedly.
I think it's a pretty hard sell.
Well, no, it's quite a soft sell in that it comes in the guise of education, which it is, but at the end of the day, some of the things that he might be espousing may well not potentially be as eco-efficient on the long run as they are, even though he may think they are.
I mean, look, he's quite extreme, isn't he? He is an extremist because he's supporting Just Stop Oil. These are people who go and sit in the middle of the road. They're people who chuck orange paint all over masterpieces and, snooker tables and interrupt completely peaceful events. They're almost a kind of eco-terrorist group, and he's supporting them. So this guy is a slight extremist.
But hang on a minute. I think I'd draw the line at calling him an extremist because, he's not...
Well, I think Just Stop Oil is an extremist group.
Do things in the extreme, but you have to...
And he's paying money to them.
Well, yeah, some of it, but you have to acknowledge that a lot of people who actually support the aims of Just Stop Oil perhaps don't support the way they're going about it.
Well, I think Just Stop Oil are the best advertisement for fossil fuels. Every time I watch them protest, I think, people are just going to get fed up with this nonsense.
Well, I'm not a supporter of Just Stop Oil. I don't think there's any evidence that he's trying to inculcate children with Just Stop Oil propaganda. However, I think that, and I hope, children are being taught about Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion in a perfectly neutral way because they see it on the news all the time and what's going on.
Well, look, I'm all for us being more renewable and energy efficient, but at the end of the day, it has to actually reach the goal that it's supposed to be attempting to reach. So, for example, if you look at electric cars, the carbon footprint to actually make one of those is huge. And even Rowan Atkinson came out and talked about it and said, you know what, I have been driving electric cars for many years. I'm no longer a fan of them because, frankly, the carbon footprint is far bigger when you make one. You might as well just keep driving your petrol car. That's what he said. But we'll be discussing that later. We'll stay with you. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Keep your thoughts coming. gbviews@gbnews.com. After the break, I'll be asking my guests what they make of the UK aiding Ukraine in their efforts to stop the war. But that's after your latest news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Nana, thank you. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom at 3:30. A man has been charged after allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final yesterday, which appeared to have an offensive reference to the Hillsborough disaster. 33-year-old James White from Warwickshire has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He's expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court next week. 97 Liverpool fans died in 1989 at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. The Immigration Minister has told GB News it's wrong for migrants to demand better hotel accommodation while waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. It's after a protest was sparked in London by migrants being asked to sleep 4 to a room. Speaking to Camilla Tominey, Robert Jenrick said sharing hotel rooms is necessary to get value for taxpayers' money. Indian authorities say a signal problem was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. That's as the number of people who've been killed has now been revised down to 275. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passing train. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who faces re-election next year, says those found guilty will be punished. And the Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims around 140 published articles contained material gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Well, stay tuned because on the way at 5 o'clock, it's this week's Outside. Now, I'm going to be speaking to a special person, a mystery person. Now, this guy, he's one of the best connected individuals in the UK's entertainment business. He's worked with the likes of Cher, Sir Elton John and Lorraine Kelly. Can you work out who he is? He's a very well-known person. Don't go anywhere.
Hello. It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people. I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 3 o'clock. Now, of course, we're going head-to-head today, and my next topic of discussion is this one. It's about the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, he has gone on record as saying that his country is ready to launch their highly anticipated counter-offensive, but he wanted the action, he warned that the action could come with high casualties. However, Dr. Ior Zvoska, I hope I said that right, he's the deputy head of the President's office and his chief foreign affairs advisor, said that the military need more reinforcements to begin the long-awaited operation, which was actually originally billed as a spring offensive, but will now take place in the summer. He stated that Kyiv still lacks sufficient weapons and ammunition to push out the Russians and take back the country. Now, the comments of many asking, actually, what is the point? Because we've been giving the Ukrainians a lot of weapons and we thought that they had adequate supplies. So what do you think? Should we carry on pumping weapons into Ukraine in this manner? Are we leaving ourselves vulnerable? Let's see what my head-to-headers think of that. Joining me is GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also a member of Reform and former MEP Ben Habib. Well, I'm going to start with you, Nigel. Ukraine. I mean, look, a lot of people are getting a bit of war fatigue. I suspect that Putin wanted that, because that eventually we may well tire of giving the Ukraine weapons. Where do you stand with it?
That I think we can't stop. That having started this process, there's no way that we can deny Ukraine the weapons they need, basically to survive. And one would hope they will have enough to actually win this war and show President Putin that aggression can't be rewarded. So Britain has been very good on this. I mean, that Ukraine constantly singles us out as the most helpful country. Other countries have been less so. Germany's been a bit slow off the mark. President Biden took his time to agree agree to Abrams tanks being allowed to go to Ukraine. Same thing with F-16s, which is now cleared the way for. It is all dangerous. We risk a confrontation with Russia by doing it, but there's no way we can back down now. And we're not giving F-16s because we don't have any, and we're keeping the Typhoons and the Lightnings we've got for the defence of Britain.
But we are, as you said, risking quite a... with Vladimir Putin, I mean, he is talking about, and I know he's intimating that potentially he's looking at nuclear war and talking about us as though we're isolated in one space. And in my head, I can see in his brain he's thinking, well, they're not attached to Europe. He's probably thinking of any sort of radiation, how it all flowed. To me, in my mind, listening to this, I think we're getting more and more isolated, and I'm not liking the sound that's coming out there. And we're also leaving ourselves quite vulnerable. Do you not see that?
We're vulnerable to an attack by Putin.
Well, what have we got left? We've given them everything, haven't we?
No, I mean, the whole thing is we've still got all our ships, all our air defences. There's 101 Typhoons out there which are still operational. That's what we need to actually protect Britain's shores. We've got our Trident submarines that can pop up anywhere, so we're certainly not
they're last resort, Nigel, aren't they?
They're what?
Trident's the last resort.
Yes, Trident is the last resort, and one would hope that President Putin understands that a nuclear attack would be a last resort too.
Well, he's got way
because
more
he would lose.
Well, he's got way more weapons actually than us, but it depends if the others are going to get on board, because I'm wondering whether they would.
So I'm increasingly having problems justifying our continued support of Ukraine, and there are a number of reasons for that. The first is that I think our principal geopolitical aim, which is the protection of Western Europe and the United Kingdom, has been achieved. And we are now fighting a proxy war, however justified it may or may not be. It is a proxy war we're fighting through Zelensky, his armed forces, against Russia in Ukraine. And the government messaging, and I scoured government websites to see what is the UK war aim in Ukraine. There is no war aim, other than, as Nigel expressed it, to throw our weight behind supporting Zelensky. So one of the things we should have learnt from repeated failed international interventions is that you have to have a very specific and clear aim when you go to war. And we are at war. We're at war in Ukraine. We are at war where we are fighting a proxy war through Zelensky in Ukraine. And what we keep saying is that we will allow the Ukrainians to decide how, if and when they wish this conflict to end. And so we're giving Zelensky effectively an open checkbook and access to Western armaments to fight this war as long as he wants.
So what would you say to Nigel's argument that actually if we don't do that, then actually Ukraine are in a lot of trouble and it will end up being a war that we'll all end up fighting?
Well, that geopolitical aim's already been achieved. It is not a war we're all going to fight.
But the Emperor... Physically fighting, you carry on going on and on and on.
It is going to go on and on.
But it's war on more borders crossing to more countries and coming to the UK.
I don't know. Look, the Emperor has no clothes. Russia has been revealed not to be the massive, mighty bear, at least with conventional weapons, that we all feared it was. This has now become an intractable, virtually, I think, irresolvable war, because Russia will not cease to throw men at it, stuck in the southeastern part of Ukraine. And this is going to go on and on. I just want to put some figures on this. The UK contributed $2.3 billion last year. We've agreed to put another $2.3 billion in this year. The US put in $75 billion last year. They're going to do another $75 billion this year. We are talking about the GDP of a medium-sized country going into this war effort. We need to develop, as a government, as a nation, we need to decide what are our aims in Ukraine. And I'm afraid if Zelensky wants our support, our continued support, there has to be some grown-up conversation about how this ends.
I don't think you can talk about war aims as far as the UK is concerned, because we're not at war.
Do you not think a proxy war is a war?
No, not in the same way that if we were fighting in, say, Iraq or Afghanistan, where we actually had a strategy that didn't work in either case, but at least
we had no war aim there either.
Well, yes, but that was our fault, but that was a war that we're involved in. This is not a war. If any NATO boots cross over into Ukraine, then yes, we will be at war with Russia, but we're not, and it's very important we try very hard not to be at war with Russia. But having got to the point of saying Ukraine, we will support Ukraine as long as it's needed, I don't think we should go back on our word and stop doing it.
But how does that work, though? Let's just, for argument's sake, let's just theorise for a second. Zelensky decides he's going to attack Moscow. Let's just say he uses the F-16s he's going to get to launch an attack.
No,
We've already seen
that can't be done.
Well, no,
Now, the reason I asked the question was to draw you, if I may say so, into saying that can't be done.
Yes.
So you're prepared to stipulate certain constraints, but you're not prepared to say that actually outside those constraints, we want a seat at the table on how this war is prosecuted.
Yes, because the issue with the example you gave of the F-16 striking Moscow is that America lays down the conditions for those planes to be allowed to be used in the war. Whoever the planes are being used for now, America still has to give its permission for what they do. What America won't do is give permission for those planes to start attacking Russian territory. And if they did start attacking Russian territory, Zelensky would lose Western support.
OK, I've just got to develop this. Forgive me.
Very quickly.
So you want this to be a domestic war fought out on Ukrainian territory, not prosecuted home for total victory against Russia, which could only happen if you were aggressive with Russia. You want that intractable, long-term war in southeastern Ukraine financed by Western money.
I don't want any war in Ukraine.
No, but that's the net effect.
I want to see the war brought to an end.
But we don't have a seat at the table on that, Nigel.
We cannot have a war aim in a war we're not fighting. What we must do is keep supporting the people who are fighting it.
Well, some would say it's a proxy war and we are fighting it in some respect, but I hear you. Interesting thoughts. What are your thoughts? Get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. I'll read some of those out. But let's move on to this one. If you just tuned in, joining me now is Nigel Nelson, also Ben Habib. They're going head-to-head on this topic. It's with regard to retailers. They've warned the government that green levies due to be imposed from next year, dubbed the grocery tax, will increase the average household shopping bill by £140 a year. Now, the British Retail Consortium estimates the total cost to be £4 billion. And there'll be a scheme to charge retailers for council recycling their packaging that will increase the cost of basic household goods when it's rolled out from April next year. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm going to start with Ben Habib.
So on the one hand, you've got Rishi Sunak going cap in hand to Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, please cap your prices. On the other hand, they're instituting an effective additional tax on retailers, which is going to increase the cost by £4 billion a year, which, by the way, equates to about 1% on the basic rate of tax. They could cut taxes by 1% if they weren't levying, if they were as a parallel to this extra cost. And I'm afraid it is just more nonsense out of this high taxation, high spending, high interventionist,
it's so tiring,
Conservative government. What we need to do is reduce taxes on business, reduce taxes on individuals, get people back into the workforce, get people prosperous again, get the economy growing, not taxing it down into these ever-decreasing circles, down a plug hole, which I think is the expression I used last time I was on your show. And this is another step in the wrong direction. We've got to stop interfering in markets. We've got to let markets sort themselves out.
They're never going to do that, Nigel.
I agree with you.
They're going to
No, they're not going to do that. I think that the situation here is, I agree with Ben, that government policy is a bit contradictory on this one. So I do take that point. However, when it comes down to effectively what is a grocery tax, it does depend on whether you believe in net zero. And if you believe in net zero and getting to that target by 2050, we are all going to have to pay something. Now, the figure the British Retail Consortium come up with that you've quoted is not backed up by the official figure, which they say grocers would go up by about, under £1 a week. So it's about £48 rather than the 140 that the British Retail Consortium are talking about, who would always oppose something like this. They represent the big supermarkets. They don't like anything that might eat
But costs will go up, Nigel. No one's disputing costs would go up.
The costs would go up, but this is my point.
At a time when there's a cost of living crisis.
Yeah, if you believe in it, we all have to actually pay something.
OK.
Well, listen, costs will always go up. Have you ever seen them go down? No. Right, let's move on to the final story for this hour, but stay tuned because we've got loads more still to come on the programme. Now, this is the ITV, I know. Listen, it's about the editor of This Morning. He's spoken out about the disgraced departure of Philip Schofield from the programme. Martin Frizzell has said to Red said to read between the lines, that's what he's saying, amid accusations of a toxic work environment at ITV. He added that he thinks that the scores are being settled. So what do you think? Is toxicity at ITV being highlighted enough? Or do you even care? Right, Nigel Nelson, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think, well, probably because we all work in television, we care a bit about it. And I think that, especially for such a popular programme like This Morning, viewers care too. So, yes, they want to know what is going on behind the scenes. I think we might actually find out. I was a bit surprised that the Culture and Media Select Committee decided to hold their own inquiry and get involved, largely because I couldn't quite see how this whole affair was a matter for Parliament. But now that they have got involved, we've got the independent inquiry that everyone's been calling for, and ITV executives will have to come to that inquiry and answer the questions that we're all asking. What is this toxic culture that exists there? I think we need some more examples other than Philip Schofield. That Eamon Holmes has been great about giving us some concrete examples. A lot of material in the Sunday papers today talks rather vaguely of bullying and this toxic culture, but doesn't actually give us specifics.
Well, because they can't really give any names. And some of the people apparently
they give examples of what is meant to be going on, which is not coming out at the moment.
No, but some people sign non-disclosure agreements, so they couldn't give too much detail. But there was one that I read where they said that they actually wanted to. They were hoping that the bus would run them over on their way to work because they didn't want to get to work because they hated it so much. And that every time they.
But we don't know what was hated.
But going to work actually and being there, and they said that every time they heard the theme tune of ITV, they were triggered as well, which is interesting.
You quit your job
even now,
if it was that bad.
Well, it depends how much. Well, you might need the money. You can't just go like that if you've got bills to pay and mouths to feed. Ben.
Well, I mean, clearly there's something going on at ITV that's not good. It hasn't been bad enough, at least yet. The revelations haven't been bad enough to trigger a criminal investigation. And NDAs, NDAs are set aside when it comes to criminal acts. They have no force. So what I'm trying to grapple with is the extent to which this is a genuine public interest issue. ITV has clearly got a problem. They're in our sitting rooms 24/7 because they're on the airwaves. But is it really something Parliament should be getting involved with if the criminal hurdle hasn't yet been triggered? And I would like to see more specific examples of what this toxicity is, with names being named and with formal complaints being made,
but that's
so that
but that's like whistleblowing, and you know that sometimes if they're not protected by any laws within the...
But at the moment, we're wrestling in a mud of innuendo, and it's hard to get clarity on what this subject is. I mean, there are people who say to me that one of the reasons Philip Schofield's being targeted is because of homophobia, because...
It's rubbish.
But people do say that.
Well, he said it.
Yeah. I've heard it from other people too, gay people who, I've chatted with and said, well, we fear that he may be targeted because he's gay. And
But imagine what would... OK, so let's swing the scenario around, and it was a heterosexual relationship. But the person was young, not illegal, but the person was very young. I think that would actually be looked on worse.
OK,
imagine if it was a young girl, so I think that would...
So what do you make of Al Pacino at the age of 83 fathering a child, I think, with a 29-year-old girl? How does that...
29, though.
No, but this guy is 28 now,
Yeah, but they're not in the workplace, are they? This is just...
I don't know.
Well, they're not in the workplace, and there's not an abuse of power as well.
Yes, the abuse of power is the key to this. Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see more... I'd like more concrete evidence of wrongdoing and a criminal complaint being made. And then I think we can all say, well, there you go.
Well, but that depends if there's any criminality at all happening there. It might all be, there are elements of hearsay and people... And maybe Martin Frizzell has a slight point that there'll be people who have scores to settle who aren't happy with the way they've been treated by ITV. But there does seem to be a lot of people who aren't happy by the way they've been treated by ITV. But let's see what a lot of you have been saying. Keep your thoughts and messages coming in. Well, we did request a statement from ITV, and a spokesperson said this: ITV and the This Morning team are incredibly proud of the 12.5 hours of award-winning live television they produce 5 days a week. It takes a huge team of people to pull all that together to make the award-winning, much-loved programme, which each week reaches 4.4 million loyal viewers. Now, it's a fast-paced environment, turning around a daily show that covers live and ever-changing issues. We have robust mechanisms in place for complaints to be raised and those that are appropriately investigated, so that those What we're hearing from this morning, team, is that they just don't recognise the picture that some are painting about the show. So that's what they're saying. But I presume there'll be loads more of it. I mean, Holly is apparently returning to the sofa on Monday. Well, stay with me. There's still loads more to come. I've got my monologue. I'll be talking about electric cars. Stay tuned. This is GB News. There's loads more to come in the next hour, plus my mystery outside guests. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is GB News political commentator Nigel Nelson and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom at 4 o'clock. A man has been charged after allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final yesterday, which appeared to have an offensive reference to the Hillsborough disaster. 33-year-old James White from Warwickshire has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He's expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court next week. 97 Liverpool fans died in 1989 at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. Indian authorities say a signal problem was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. The number of people who were killed in the accident has now been revised down to 275. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passing train. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who faces election next year, says those found guilty will be punished. The Immigration Minister has told GB News it's wrong for migrants to demand better hotel accommodation while waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. It's after a protest was sparked in London by migrants being asked to sleep 4 to a room. Speaking to Camilla Tominey, Robert Jenrick said the government will never put their interests above the British public. He also said sharing hotel rooms is necessary to get value for taxpayers' money.
Remember, these are migrants who have said they are destitute. They've said that they have absolutely nowhere to stay, no friends, no family, no money, and the taxpayer is stepping up and providing them with good quality accommodation and board and lodgings. And so, I think those migrants are wrong to protest and say that they deserve to have single bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms and so on. And I'm pleased to see that common sense seems to have prevailed in this case.
A Labour MP has told GB News victims are too scared to complain about sexual predators in Parliament. Charlotte Nichols told Camilla Tominey that harassment is baked into every single part of how Westminster operates. She also accused the Labour Party of choosing not to act on concerns raised by a number of colleagues over a very long period. Her comments come after she revealed being handed a list of 30 MPs she should avoid when first becoming an MP.
It's happened to me in meetings during the middle of the working day. I've had colleagues do things like inappropriate touching, their hand on your leg or on your back, or making comments towards you. And I'm someone that, as I said, within the hierarchy of Westminster, is relatively protected by virtue of being an MP. So how much worse it must be if you're someone who has less power in the institution, where you're more likely to experience it and even less able to speak out when it happens.
The Prime Minister is stressing the importance of a close and candid relationship with the US President ahead of his visit to the White House next week. Rishi Sunak is expected to attend a baseball game in Washington, D.C. prior to talks with Joe Biden. He'll also be meeting business executives in an attempt to build closer economic ties between the two countries. More than 2,600 NHS staff in Scotland have taken time off work due to long COVID, with some off sick for more than 2 years. That's according to Freedom of Information requests by the Scottish Liberal Democrats. The Scottish Government says it's investing £10 million into the long COVID support fund. The Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. Royal correspondent Michael Cole says it'll be very unusual to see a royal on the witness stand.
A royal prince going into the witness box to give evidence in a very contentious case against Mirror Group newspapers. That hasn't happened ever since the 19th century. It is unprecedented. I mean, there's nothing in the British Constitution that says a royal prince cannot give evidence or cannot be called to be a witness.
4 children have died and a man is missing in Canada after they were swept into a river in Quebec. Police say the group were fishing when the incident happened. The children, who were all over the age of 10, were found unresponsive on the shore. 6 other people were rescued. You're up to date on GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Bethany. It's just coming up to 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. How dirty do you need to go to get green? Now, I am resisting this nonsense with every sinew of my body. I will not buy an electric car. I will use my power as a consumer to dictate the narrative, and I suggest that we all do the same. I mean, yeah, I agree in some areas we need better air quality, but I also subscribe to a better environment. To me, being green doesn't just mean just in my backyard and to hell with those who suffer as a consequence of my greenness. It means being environmentally friendly in all aspects of the production chain. And I'm really struggling to work out why anyone driving one of these EVs thinks that they're doing good for the planet. Round of applause that the emissions are zero carbon on the road. But what about at source? How much carbon did it take to make it in the first place? And what environmental cost? Sounds to me like a case of out of sight, out of mind. And a lot of people agree with me. Rowan Atkinson, one of my favourites, remember him in Blackadder, and then there was Baldrick. I have a cunning plan, my lord. Rowan has an electrical and an electrical engineering degree. And after owning hybrid and electric vehicles, he said, electric motoring doesn't seem to be quite the environmental panacea that it's claimed to be. He pointed out that the greenhouse gas emissions are 70% higher than manufacturing petrol cars, and that the lithium-ion batteries require rare earth metals and huge amounts of energy to make. And he's not wrong. But it's something I've been saying from the start. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Ask yourselves, where did they obtain the lithium for the battery, each of these cars containing some 4,000 cylinders? Who mined for it? And how did it get to your door? Round of applause to you with your eco-credentials, driving your electric car. At least you're not polluting the atmosphere near your house. And what source is producing that electricity that you're using to power the vehicle? More likely it's fossil fuels, and if it's wind, how did they make the turbines? I guarantee you that fossil fuels are involved, and actually wind turbines aren't that great for the animals whose habitat they encroach on. From what I've heard, animals are being negatively impacted by them, particularly in the sea where the hum is causing interference. Even digging up pavements for the charging points of these EVs, where there are way too few, is bad for the environment. And it's not as if we all have time during the day to sit about waiting for these things to charge. And as a single female, I don't want to be hanging around late at night waiting for a charge. And they're super heavy. When I see some of these electric cars on the roads, even the small ones, when I'm in my little petrol car, by the way, Petric, that'd be interesting, which has done 180,000 miles, by the way, my little Citroen C1, I love it. I think to myself, God, those cars look heavy. I dread to think of the damage one of those, even the small ones at a very slow speed, would do on impact. I'm with Rowan. We simply aren't there yet with EVs, and it's not really a realistic replacement. He called them a perverse choice of hardware with which to lead the automobile's fight against the climate crisis. And he makes the point that if we just keep our current cars for longer, we'd dramatically cut CO2. By all means, do away with your diesel car. But if you've got an old petrol engine and you're genuine about the environment, keep it until it gives up the ghost. But before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is there a war on the middle class? It's been reported that Rishi Sunak wants to cut national insurance or income tax by up to 2p before next year's general election. Now, a welcome break from the highest tax burden of 70 years. Stay tuned, find out. But the Labour Party have their own plans. We'll be discussing those. Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. I'll be heading around the globe to discuss all the latest from Trump and Biden. We're speaking to the host of the Politics People podcast. Then stay tuned, my mystery guest at 5 o'clock in this week's Outside. He's a manager of the stars. He's also now the chairman of a huge talent agency. Who do you think he is? That's on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbviews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also broadcaster and columnist Danny Kelly, and journalist. He doesn't write anything. I don't know whether he can write. Can you write, Danny? Do you write?
To be honest, I'm really embarrassed about my writing. As an adult to middle-aged,
I was right.
I can write, but it's indecipherable. It's something that I really feel embarrassed about, writing a note in public. Luckily nowadays we do things on messages.
Oh, can you write me a note, Danny? Write me something, let me see. I want to see how bad it is.
But it is.
Good for you, not the doctor.
I could have been the doctor, you're right.
Oh, okay. But Danny, I've got to start with you. Because you're a car salesperson. He hates that.
I own a car business besides being a journalist.
He's a car dealer.
Do you know, the biggest surprise out of that opening monologue is that someone as beautiful as you is single. That was the biggest shock.
Danny. He's good.
Your little Citroen with a small engine with 180,000 miles. Do you know, I've never really thought about the CO2 emissions in the building of these equipments, of these new electric vehicles. As a used car dealer, I won't touch them. As a used car, people, generally speaking, have lost faith in the electric car market, and that's because of warranties and reliability issues, and also about the charging, which you touched on as well. It's interesting to see Rowan Atkinson come out, and it's interesting that this was published in The Guardian of all newspapers, which undermines a lot of what they're in trying to indoctrinate their readers. Although I don't know if you're a reader of The Guardian, I think you're already indoctrinated. I think you already have that worldview with certain issues. But it's great to see The Guardian giving publicity to maybe, generally speaking, petrol cars and diesel cars. I know Nigel is a petrol car driver. He and I have spoken over recent weeks about petroleum engines. And I agree, if you can get a reliable, cheap little runaround, a petrol car, maybe not a diesel, because we hear about ULEZ and all of that, just stick with it.
Yeah.
Just stick with it.
I suspect the reason why The Guardian are talking about this is because half of them probably drive petrol cars. And the last time they got caught out when they were talking about reparations, and it turned out that some of their owners may well have had links to slavery, so they're being a bit more cautious. Nigel?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've looked at electric cars on the basis that we will all have to drive them eventually. After 2030, we're going to have to start replacing any petrol cars left with electric ones. The problem, I think, is, as you outlined, first of all, there's no charging points around, so you can't charge the things up, and yet there are plenty of garages where you can get your petrol. The idea of trying to do it through your house causes all sorts of problems. You have to get something built in. And the other thing was that when I looked at an electric car and looked at a petrol car, the electric car was an awful lot more expensive. So, OK, I appreciate that over a period of time, the electricity will be cheaper.
Maybe
But
not.
the point I think that Danny made there is I just don't have any faith in them at the moment.
Nobody has. I don't have any faith in them. And if like Rowan Atkinson, who's got he's been studying electrical engineering, and so he's a very clever man when it comes to this. He said that he's owned, he had a hybrid for many years, I think it was 18 years or something. Then he went for electric cars, which he's owned for about 9 years, I think he said. And he said that it's just not there. The infrastructure's not there. The carbon footprint, if you're thinking that you're going to be doing a good thing, actually it's 70% more. The carbon footprint is bigger to create the thing. And the worry is, I suspect what will happen, like with your mobile phone, you had this plug-in style charger, and then 10 years later they go, oh, do you know what? We're going to change the plug for the charger, sorry. So everybody's going to now have to get this new, sorry, I just spat on there, it's quite a big one as well. I saw their eyes go straight to it. I had to own up to it immediately. It was only right. You could have even seen it through your TV. I'd be so embarrassed. Sorry about that at home. Off the lens of the camera. But the point is, they might then decide, we're going to change the charging point now. So then you've got to get a new car to come up with a charging point. Then the duration and the longevity of that car might become the same with the phone. Within 2-3 years, the phone it's not really worth it. You might as well buy a whole new one. Yeah. And it's one unit now instead of, we're going to change that, we're going to change this. I can fix my little C1 on my own. I can change the coils, I can do this, I can do that. I'm great with it.
Cool, you can come and do my car then on the base. I can't do any of those things.
May I ask, Nigel, because you considered an electric vehicle, was it to do with the environment or was it purely to do with money?
No, it was to do with the fact that eventually we're going to have them.
Well, you don't have to have them. It's only a new car after 2030. There's a lot of calls for
That's right, but quite clearly after that day, we're going to gradually all gravitate to electric cars. I mean, eventually, the petrol cars will disappear, there won't be any new ones, and that'll be the end of it. So I was partly thinking about preparing for that, and just really put off by the expense, because it was something like 20,000 more than the same thing that I've been looking at for a petrol car, and the fact that we've got no charging points around the area. I don't know where I would have actually refilled it.
That's really interesting, because I wonder what motivates a lot of people to buy these cars, whether it's financial or whether it's environmental. And you can drive around and you can feel really virtuous and you can think that you're doing great. But I'm not sure that it's for the environment with a lot of people. And the reason that I say that is that in 2025, Sadiq Khan is going to say, if you want to drive into central London in an electric vehicle, you're going to have to pay congestion charge. And if you think about it, whether you're producing any CO2 or any pollutants, you're still adding to the congestion. So why the hell should a Tesla driver avoid paying £15 to drive in London, because it's still a big lump of metal taking.
Oh, they're so big, aren't they? Those cars. Do you know, I look at them and I think, cracky, that does look heavy. They look heavy. They are heavy. They destroy the tyres quickly as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of you're going to have to replace the tyres faster. I think you're wrong, Nigel. I don't think that in 2030 or 2035 we'll all be doing this at all. Because I think you're wrong. And the reason I think you're wrong is because they are not doing what they're meant to do. At the end of the day, the CO2 to produce them is bigger. The rare minerals and resources that are being used, the lithium, we haven't got enough lithium to keep making them. Each of those has about, I think it's about 4,000 of these cylinders inside, little tubes inside, all of that. You can't, for each car, you've got to do that. And then if you look at the reality of actually mining for this thing, it's awful. That, you know, I think they've got children mining this, and it's a humanitarian disaster.
If you're an opponent of the 2030 cut-off point like I am, and I'd say like the majority of people are, I think when Boris Johnson announced this, it was almost like a Brexit dividend. Guess what? We're free from the EU because their date is 2035.
Yeah, that's right. They've changed their date.
Their date's always been 2035.
Germany has changed its date, hasn't it?
Well, generally speaking, in the EU, it's a 2035 cut-off. In fact, I think it's EU-wide, because that's the point of the EU, all for one and one for all. So I'd be surprised if there were any autonomous decisions like the UK. So Boris Johnson in 2021, maybe, he said we're going to bring it forward from the EU.
To show off.
Like, why?
You're supposed to get rid of the bad ideas from the EU, not the good ones.
Precisely. The infrastructure isn't there, generally speaking. A pal of mine's got a 70 grand Tesla. He tried to get up to Edinburgh, and he said he was shaking with nerves at one point because he couldn't have the air conditioning on because there was a crash on the motorway. And his range was saying that he's got about 70. Edinburgh was 50 miles away. He was worried about indicating even. The aircon went, the radio went off. It was silence.
And then he must have been sitting there like this.
It was, honestly, he's petrified.
A horse and cart would be better.
Oh, you're better off with that. No, I think Rowan Atkins has got it right, and I am not getting one of those as well. I will do with every sinew of my body. I will not be buying an electric car, so there. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, I'm asking, is there a war on the middle class? Now, it's been reported that Rishi Sunak wants to cut national insurance or income tax by up to 2p before the next general election. A welcome break, some may say, for the highest tax burdeners. However, plans could be far away as next April. Also, Sir Keir Starmer has been coming up with plans which appear to be attacking the middle class as well. It looks to me like the kind of behaviour and the kind of money that these politicians are trying to extrapolate is from the middle class neighbourhoods rather than some of the poor ones. So what do you think? What's your thoughts? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. Tell me what you think. I've got a poll up right now asking, is there a war on the middle class? Cast your vote now.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
So good afternoon, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. If you just joined us, welcome. It's coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock, and it's time now for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is there a war on the middle class? Now, it has been reported that Rishi Sunak wants to cut national insurance or income tax by up to 2p before next year's general election. But that's before next year's general election. It's a welcome break for the highest tax burden in 70 years. However, such plans could be as far away as next April, so that's the while. It's a promise, but will he really keep the promise? The Labour Party could be extending anti-discrimination law to incorporate the inequality of social class, giving public bodies the power to divert funds and services such as GPs and libraries from middle-class neighbourhoods to poorer ones. So here we go again, another party attacking the middle class. Jacob Rees-Mogg commented on the alleged plans with once again, the Keir Starmer's mask slips off. A man who stood on a hard left Corbynite agenda to win the Labour leadership vows would deliver a hard left attack on already hard-pressed rural and suburban areas. Now, is this what you think? This is a declaration of war, in my view, on Middle Britain. But what do you think? It's the same old socialist mantra. Make everybody's equality equally poor by taking a scythe to the success rather than seeking to make everyone more prosperous. So Keir Starmer's message to Middle England is this: read my lips, higher taxes, which will be accompanied by worse public services. So what do you think for the Great British Debate this hour? I'm asking, is there a war on the middle classes? What do you think? I'm joined now by Ben Habib, he's a former Brexit Party MEP, and Anna McGovern, a political commentator. Right. And also Dennis McShane, former Minister for Europe. Hello, Dennis. Nice to see you. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Dennis McShane. A war on the middle class.
Oh, it was so funny. I think probably only Ben, maybe Ali and you, Dan, and of course the great Jacob Rees-Mogg believes there's a single socialist piece of DNA in Keir Starmer's makeup. For heaven's sake, 99 years ago, 1924, Ben Smiling, because he knows this story, the Daily Mail published a thing called the Zinoviev letter. Zinoviev was a big cheese friend of Lenin and Stalin, and he said the communists were going to arrive in England and nobody should vote Labour because the communists had persuaded the Labour Party to impose Soviet communism on Britain. Biggest forgery in British journalism. Didn't actually work, so Tories lost that election, but then Labour came into government and were a disaster, but that's another story. And this, look, the only war in the middle class is the cost now of having a mortgage, the cost of paying for your supermarket bill, the cost of running an electric vehicle. These are all Rishi Sunak ideas. Sunak is the biggest enemy of the middle class that Britain's ever seen, because he's not part of the middle class. He's worth more than King Charles. He hasn't the faintest idea how any of the people listening to this wonderful programme live, and he is just crucifying us with higher prices, higher costs, higher everything. No, if you can find... I'm waiting. One day, Sir Keir will emerge with a socialist idea, but I'm not holding my breath.
But he's not for himself, is he, really? He's also a Sir. Anna McGovern.
No, absolutely. And I don't think you can trust a single thing that he says. As we've seen many times, time and time again, he will just say something, throw it out there into the media sphere, and then you turn on it time and time again. He's slippery, slimy, and I don't think anyone can trust him. I think the Labour Party completely hate hard-working British people who've actually worked hard to get to a good position that they're in. And then instead of actually rewarding them for their hard work, they just want to penalise them time and time again. So they should be nowhere near government. They should be nowhere near number 10.
Ben Habib.
Well, I completely endorse what Anna said, and to some extent, Dennis is going to be surprised I endorse some of what he said. But, I mean, Rishi Sunak has been a hopeless Conservative Party Prime Minister. Back in November, we were told that taxes couldn't be cut because we had to first get inflation under control. And actually, we've kept taxes up, and inflation still hasn't come down. And the reason it hasn't come down is because it doesn't pay to work in the United Kingdom. Taxes are too high. I'm delighted that as an election throwaway, he's going to cut 2p off the basic rate of tax, but he should have done it now, and he should have taken tax down across the board. That would have made it pay to work, it would have got more people into work, it would have reduced the burden on employers, the cost of living would have reduced, and the economic machine would have kick-started. What we need is a genuine centre-right government that understands that people's liberty starts with their back pocket. Make it worthwhile for people to work, make it worthwhile for them to set up businesses, and they will do it. And the economy will grow, and believe it or not, the exchequer will get richer. You can't get rich by taxing us to infinity. It doesn't work.
But if we take some of the... So I'm going to take a Labour Party policy where they're talking about removing the charitable status of private schools so that they can use that money apparently to... and also taking the non-dom status. They think that there's going to be enough money to then help with the education system. That is definitely a tax on the middle class, because people who send their kids to private schools aren't really the upper classes. I know this because my parents sent me to a private school. Dennis, that is an example, surely, of something where they are attacking Middle England again.
Well, that's a very, very old story. It costs about £40,000 a term to send your boy to Eton. And I actually have never understood, no other country does it. I'm not against private schools. I have them in America, I have them in France, I have them in Germany. But nowhere else are there great tax breaks for private schools. So I would actually say our real problem is, actually, I agree with the slogan, levelling up. I mean, our country's been levelled down, especially when the Lib Dem blob was in government. You remember that man Clegg? He increased student fees massively. Your own wonderful reporter, Olivia Utley, I saw tweeting today saying she has now been out of university for 8 years. Her debt has gone up to £51,000 just because of Sunak's increase in interest rates. So this is the Sunak attack on the middle class, Nana. Ask Olivia. Ask Ben. I mean, I agree with everything Ben said.
But there's no...
sensible, a centre-sensible left government.
Yeah, but there's no indication... Listen, Dennis, there is no indication that Keir Starmer would do anything differently. And if anything, he would probably tax higher. I'm not hearing Sir Keir Starmer mention about tax cuts. Anna, have you heard Keir Starmer say anything about cutting taxes, especially helping out the middle class? To me, it sounds like take from the middle class. It's like a Robin Hood tactic because he thinks that the middle class are wealthy.
Oh, no, absolutely. And if anything, I think he'll just hike them high, even higher. I mean, we see the Conservative Party as well do this. And they've made promises, for example, that we're going to put taxes down, and then we've not seen that yet. And Rishi Sunak making these promises today, that won't come into effect, we've just said, until next year. But Labour, absolutely, I've not heard anything about tax cuts. If anything, they will be punishing hard-working British people who've worked incredibly hard to get the money that they've earned, and instead they will punish them by putting up taxes continuously more and more. We're basically in, I think, a socialist country at this point.
Well, Ben Habib, you probably agree with
Well, Anna's absolutely right. We are living in a socialist nightmare.
Yes.
And the problem with socialism is that eventually it's deeply depressing. But the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. And I remember when the Labour Party last came into office, they inherited a fantastic economy. John Major actually left them a public surplus, not a public borrowing requirement, but a public surplus. Last time the government had a surplus, and they left with the country bankrupt. When Labour come into power this time, they'll be inheriting an economy that is already teetering on the edge of collapse. And they will kick it over the edge within seconds. And so I fear greatly for the economic trajectory of the United Kingdom, and therefore for the middle class.
Well, didn't they leave a note when they left office saying there's no more money left, Dennis? I mean, I hear that. Seriously, even their councils spend way more money, as I suspect some people will find out in the near-distant future. Dennis, what would you say to all of this?
Very, very simply, I don't know what dear old Ben's talking about. I was elected in 1997. I was already an MP, and in my area of South Yorkshire, that's up in the north of England now. It's a bit far away from the sort of where the GB News elites live. And there, we were so poor. We were so poor, 75% of average EU income. We were getting handouts from Europe just to keep a bit of industry alive. That was John Major's.
No.
What happened was Tony Blair came in, put a big notice up saying, I won't raise taxes. We actually cut taxes. You want a tax-cutting government. I'm not sure Starmer's going to do it. Don't try Labour, but for heaven's sake, don't trust Conservatives for the last few years. No, Ben agrees with me. Anna agrees with me.
Okay,
you agree with me. What's the problem? You're all much more Labour than I am.
What's the alternative, though, very briefly, then? So if we ask you the question, then, what do you think with regard to the Labour Party, then? Are they attacking the middle classes? Do you think that there is a grab for the middle classes? What do you think, Benabi? Yes, are they doing it, yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. 70% of earners in this country fall into a bracket between 30,000 a year and 62 or 63,000 a year. The vast majority of the country are middle class, and it is that middle class that is being burdened by taxing.
You could argue, though, that the Conservatives have left the tax level at the sort of tax level at the same point, so then more people fall into tax.
That's precisely what...
That's a problem.
Absolutely right. They've dragged people into these higher tax rates.
But that's the Conservative Party. Anna McGovern, very briefly, then, what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the Conservatives aren't conservative, and we need a government that actually going to, bring forward conservative policies and actually save this country.
Dennis McShane, your final word. You've got about 10 seconds.
Very simply, time for a change. It can't get any worse under the Tories. Let's have a sensible centre, sensible government. Believe me, if
time for Reform UK.
I'm the man for the moon.
Well, that's what they said about Donald Trump, and look what they got after that. Thank you very much, Dennis McShane, Ben Habib, and also Anna McGovern. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Excellent. Right, well, what do you think? You've heard all that. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is there a war on the middle class? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Nana, thank you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom at 4:33. A man has been charged after allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final, which appeared to have an offensive reference to the Hillsborough disaster. 33-year-old James White from Warwickshire has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He's expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court next week. 97 Liverpool fans died in 1989 at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. The Immigration Minister has told GB News it's wrong for migrants to demand better hotel accommodation while waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. It's after a protest was sparked in London by migrants being asked to sleep 4 to a room. Speaking to Camilla Tominey, Robert Jenrick said sharing hotel rooms is necessary to get value for taxpayers' money. Indian authorities say a signal problem was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. That's as the number of people who've been killed has been revised down to 275. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passing train. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who faces re-election next year, says those found guilty will be punished. The Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims around 140 published articles contain material gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Bethany. Well, coming up at 5, it is this week's Outside. And this is where I interview a celebrity, a star, somebody who's had an interesting life and take a look at life outside the job. We talk highs, lows, lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. Now, this man has worked with stars. He's worked with them for decades. He's even an executive producer on a 2017 film, The Time of Their Lives. He has had stars like Cher on his books. He's got some amazing people that he's worked with. But who do you think he is? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk.com even. Also on the way, is there attack on the middle classes? We're discussing that next.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, if you've just joined me, where have you been? It's another hour and so it's fine. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget you can download the GB News app. You can check out all the programmes on the channel. I'm Nana Akua. Right now it's time, though, for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is there a war on the middle class? Now, it's been reported that Rishi Sunak wants to cut national insurance or income tax by up to 2% before next year's general election. But that's before next year's general election. Do we believe him? Sounds like a welcome break, excuse me, from the highest tax burden in 70 years. However, such plans could be as far away as next April. That's too long to wait. And in the meantime, the Labour Party could be extending anti-discrimination laws to incorporate the inequality of social class. So if I translate that for you, he's kind of wanting to level up the playing field, giving public bodies the power to divert funds and services such as GPs and libraries from the affluent areas. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is there a war on the middle class? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Nigel, I'm going to start with you.
OK.
What's there a war on the middle class? Do you think there's a war? I felt like Zippy there. Do you remember Zippy in Rainbow? Is there a war on the middle class?
No, what there is you'll be surprised that I'm actually rather in favour of redistribution. And that's what, it's in Labour's DNA. That is what Keir Starmer is talking about. And it's not about taking a library from a middle-class area and plonk it into a working-class one. It's about building a library in a working-class area. And what that would need is you transfer funds over from wealthier areas to poorer ones, better than the way Rishi Sunak was doing it, which was during the leadership debates. He was talking about giving money. He'd already done it, giving money to richer areas. So he told people in Tunbridge Wells down in Kent, which is a hugely rich area, he diverted some money from a poor area to them.
Well, but not all areas of Tunbridge Wells are rich, though, and wealthy, and maybe that poor area had plenty of funds and there was some spare funds. I mean, you know, like each area has places within those areas that aren't as profitable, like, you know, like even Pimlico, apparently there's a hotel where migrants are staying and they complain that the rooms aren't nice enough. What about you, Danny? What do you think?
Nigel, the wealth redistribution, but that would, the 2p cut would benefit wealthy people as well as poorer people. So I don't understand how the wealth redistribution...
I'm talking about generally speaking, what Labour has always existed for, which is to redistribute wealth around a bit. When it comes down to Rishi Sunak and the tax cut, he's only doing this or saying it to appease the right wing of the Tory party, who are demanding these tax cuts. It would be wrong to cut any taxes now until inflation is under control.
Right. My view is that he's trying to bribe the voters personally, because a twopence in a pound interest cut is I think it's incredibly attractive, whether you're a Labour voter or whether you're a Conservative voter. In my view, I think what he should do, at the moment you don't pay a penny in tax until you earn over 12. I think the threshold's 12,500. I think that should be increased, because...
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? They've kept it at the same level, so more and more people will fall into it as the prices inflate, so more and more people.
Sure, but also, if we accept that there's the right wing of the party who are frothing at the mouth for things to be done, they will be saying that there are people sitting on their backsides at home who aren't working, because when they calculate what their outgoings are to maybe get a bus into town to work 40 hours a week stacking shelves at Aldi, and they're getting paid 11 knicker an hour, and then once they get all of their deductions and they take out all of the fuel and all of the cost, then they're better off sitting on their backsides, actually claiming support.
And you're absolutely right. That to actually raise the tax-free allowance would really benefit people who are on very low income.
That's correct. And if you're on
which was a Lib Dem policy that the Tories then adopted.
There's no harm in adopting great policies. No. I don't think that should be embarrassing or should be shameful.
One of Nick Clegg's great achievements from Coalition.
Yeah, I think if there are great things that you can poach or copy, or if you want nick off... So let's just say the threshold was raised to £18,000. Which I think, with the cost of living and the expenditure and the price of everything, then I think that's not unreasonable. The 18k would benefit people more who on a lower salary than the 150.
Can we move to the question, though? And I'm asking whether there's a war in the middle class. And if you look at it, that the fact that the second tax threshold has remained the same place, so people who are paying up to 40% tax threshold has remained the same. So inflation has meant people's wages have risen, so more people are in that higher tax bracket. And there are so many policies that seem to attack those who are in the middle. And And it seems all of the policies from both of the parties appear to be taking money from those people. And it doesn't seem right. And in my view, there is a war in the middle class. Yeah, but you don't think there is.
Well, I mean, more people are middle class if you take it based on incomes because of what the Tories have done. So more people have been caught in higher tax rates. You're absolutely right. The difficulty is at the moment with inflation as high as it is, if you pump more money back into the economy, which is what tax cuts actually do, inflation starts to go up. So until you've got inflation down to a reasonable level, probably about 2%, you really can't afford tax cuts.
I don't know about that. I think if you cut taxes, then you have growth, and growth can actually do better.
This was the Liz Truss idea, and look what happened there.
Well, no, they didn't give her a chance. They didn't actually give her a chance. They didn't want her in, frankly. They wanted their man, Rishi Sunak, so he would do exactly what he's doing, and that's what's happening. Right, let's see. This show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. This hour, I've got... let's go to Grimsby. Let's have a chat with Alan McNeely, who appeared on another show the other night with Mark Boland. You're not supposed... Oh, was that John Reid? Was it Alan? I can tell. It was you, Alan. What are you doing on Mark Dolan's show? You're on my show. What were you thinking? I'm joking.
No, if they asked, you know.
Well, they shouldn't tell a word. No, it's wonderful. You were fabulous, by the way. What do you think? Is this an attack on the middle classes?
It certainly is, Nana. I mean, Labour have always promoted the idea of equal opportunity of outcome. But that's not the same as equal opportunity to achieve, if you understand what I mean. So the money's got to come from somewhere, and it'll come from the middle class, and they'll take that money and use it somewhere else. If you go back to the days of communism, Nana, and the Soviet Union, you've only got to look at how that operated to see where the Labour Party are going. The article in the Mail Online was absolutely terrifying, but it's not surprising because Stammer would have us believe that he's a Tony Blair Mark II. He's nothing like that. He's Red Ken, isn't he? At the end of the day, he's just Red Ken hiding behind Tony Blair Mark II, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Well, listen, Alan, lovely to talk to you as well. Sort out your mic, though. You need to sort out the audio there because it sounded a bit muffly. Right. And you two, you're very clear. Thank you. It's lovely to talk to you. Have a lovely day. That's Alan McNeely. He's our fabulous Great British Voice here on my show, Nana Akua. Thank you, Alan. Speak to you soon. Bless his heart. Right, so what do you think? Keep your thoughts coming. GBviews at gbnews.com. But this week, 300 industry leaders warned that AI, artificial intelligence, could lead to human extinction and should be considered very seriously. Artificial intelligence technologies have been around for decades, in fact, but the speed with which the language learning models like ChatGPT have entered the mainstream has intensified concerns. So let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me, a senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and also broadcaster and journalist, Danny Kelly. Are you scared of AI, Danny? Are you scared?
No, I'm not. Although I understand that AI at the moment, and don't forget, it's not in its infancy, because you're right, AI has been around for
We've been doing it for...
But with the advancements of technology, it's really speeding up and accelerating. AI apparently can look at a political cartoon, maybe drawn by someone like Matt, who draws for The Telegraph, and can unpick it and understand its context and why it's funny. Now, does that impose a threat to mankind?
Well, at least someone can. I'm joking.
Of course, but there would have to be a nefarious actor involved in order to allow AI to pose a threat to our existence. Or am I missing something?
No, I mean, the trouble is the nefarious actors who might be involved. So, I mean, the difficulty, I think, with AI is the difficulty we've had with all new technology. Regulation is always way behind development. So we're still... I mean, Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet, the World Wide Web in 1991. We're still trying to sort out legislation about how to control it. And the difficulty with AI is we're really behind the curve about controlling that. So it's things like, if AI can think for itself, what would it then do? And that Microsoft have done an experiment which has shown that it can take in external experiences which weren't programmed into it, which shows that somewhere along the line it's able to do things that humans have lost control of.
Well, you know what, as well, I'd read it that this AI, it gave it, its operator was telling it what to do, and it it decided, the AI, I mean, this was a simulation, it didn't actually kill anybody, but in the simulation it killed its operator. It decided that, I'm not going to do what you're going to do, I'm going to kill the operator.
But how would it kill the operator?
Well, but that's what it was. It was programmed to do something else, but that's what it would have done had it been, So the AI, and also they had another one where they taught it a little bit of Bangladeshi, I think it was, and then within a short space of time, it could do the whole language. So this is, but there's another one where the AI was used to make the connection from the neurological connection from the motor neurons to allow somebody who's paralysed to walk, and the man walks.
But that's the good side of AI.
There's a good side. So there are good things, but there are bad things. I'm only worried because I've seen The Terminator.
Yeah, well, I think we don't have to worry about science fiction. It's the science fact that we have to be concerned about.
That's what you think. That's what they all say until it happens. Anyway, what do you think? You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. On the way, my mystery guest in Outside. Have you guessed who he is? I'll be talking to a celebrity. Every Sunday I do this. He's one of the best connected individuals in the UK entertainment business. His clients have won Emmys, BAFTAs and Grammys. He's a fantastic agent, a celebrity agent. He's got some great people on his books like Cher, but who do you think he is? And then on the way, Worldview, I'll be having a chat. That's up next with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudderidge, on all the latest happenings in the States. Plus, Danny Armstrong will be giving us the latest look in Ukraine.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good afternoon. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and it is now time for World View. Let's go over to the States and have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, and find out what the latest updates are there. Now, this was a big one, Paul. Thank you very much for joining me. Joe Biden, he fell down again. I mean, I thought he fell over nothing. They said it was a sandbag. I didn't see a sandbag. What, did he fall over something? Paul?
Oh, yes, apparently there was a sandbag. Look, the word fall in the United States until really recently, it meant autumn. Now it means Biden. It's extraordinary. This chap, he might not be able to walk in a straight line, but he can find a sandbag, apparently. So he's got his detecting skills are really off the scale. Yes, apparently there was a sandbag, and apparently there was a sandbag in Japan when we talked about that. And then they keep putting sandbags on the stairs of Air Force One as well, on the way up and down. So this man can find a sandbag in, I don't know, a place where sandbags are banned. But anyway, so yes, he's had another fall. Now, this Obama's former doctor, White House doctor, has now said this is now teetering on malpractice from the White House to even put him in to run again. This is elder abuse. Even Donald Trump this week, Donald Trump did a town hall where he was being interviewed by Hannity, and he did a town hall and he asked Hannity, he phoned him apparently before and said, don't make jokes about Biden's lack of cognizance and awareness and his current physical and mental decline. Don't make jokes about it. That's from Donald Trump. When Donald Trump is saying, don't make fun of the guy, we know that we are at some sort of tipping point. This is getting absurd now. The man cannot be allowed out in public.
But maybe Donald Trump has worked out that he doesn't want to get the sympathy of the public because he's done so well working on the sympathy of the public himself. He's done so well off it himself. What's his polling like then now? If you're watching, if you're on radio, we're watching it now. Joe Biden's fallen over nothing.
Look at that sandbag. Oh, come on.
There's
that
no
sandbag's like
sandbag.
the Sahara.
Why would you put...
Where
would you put a sandbag? If there was a sandbag, which I didn't see, if there was a sandbag there, why would you put a sandbag around the podium that you know an old man's going to trip over it? If they're not trying to kill him.
Oh, I know. Like I said, there isn't one, OK? I'm just saying there isn't one. But this is the current defence from the White House. And there's, Joe Biden now hilariously laughing it off and going, I've been sandbagged and it's all just jolly. No. But we're actually seeing elder abuse. This is what's actually happening. It's like, keep going out there.
And what about Donald Trump? Oh, go on. I was going to ask you about Trump's polling there. How's he doing? Because I
was about to answer that. Yes, exactly. So look, DeSantis, as we know, entered the race last week. Mike Pence has entered the race last week, and this has had a cataclysmic effect on the polling. Trump is up another 5 points. So now Trump is at when DeSantis wasn't running, he was at 48%. Now DeSantis and Pence have entered the race. He's at 53%. So all of his other rivals have only got 47 between them. Everything, we've said this before, this is not straight politics anymore. This is cultural, this is social, this is almost religious in certain areas in the United States. And that's what's actually happening here. They are not taking on a political adversary here. They're taking on a cultural revolution.
Wow, it's incredible, isn't it? And do you think, in your view, because Trump said that he was sort of cheated out of the election victory last time, do you think that that's right? Because so far, everything he said has turned out to be true. Even there's a lot of sceptics out there, but so far everything he said has turned out to be true.
In short, yes, absolutely. And when I first was doing this, I was on other channels when, because GB News wasn't around. And I said, look, Biden might have won the day after. I said, Biden might have won. I've looked at everything. I can get my hands on. Yeah, I think he was cheated.
Well, a lot of people seem to think that he's sort of saying that and it's not true. Listen, Paul, it's always a pleasure talking to you. You will keep us updated on what's going on in America. I love hearing all the stuff, especially Trump. I think he probably will win the next election. I can't see anybody else coming to be a challenge to him at all.
That's another conversation.
Yeah,
it's another conversation. It's abortion. Abortion will be the thing, I'm telling you.
Is that the one? All right. Well, listen, it's so good to talk to you, Paul Dudridge. Always a pleasure. That is Paul Dudridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. He's keeping us us up to date with what's going on stateside. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. Listen, on the way, I've got a very exciting guest in my Outside segment just after 5 o'clock. He is an absolute incredible agent to some big stars. You won't want to miss who he is, but keep your guesses coming. gbviews@gbnews.com. You're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. You're listening live on digital radio as well. More to come in the next hour. So it is 5 o'clock. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. But on the way next, it's Outside. Now, this is where we talk highs, lows, and lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. And my guest is an incredible celebrity agent. He's had an amazing career and some fantastic achievements. He'll be live in the studio. Have you worked out who he is? You won't want to miss it. And then on the way, my Great British debate this out, and I'm asking, do you think that migrants sharing hotel rooms is humane? First, though, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom at 5:01. A man has been charged after allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final, which appeared to have an offensive reference to the Hillsborough disaster. 33-year-old James White from Warwickshire has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He's expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court next week. 97 Liverpool fans died in 1989 at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. Indian authorities say a signal problem was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. The number of people who were killed in the accident has now been revised down to 275. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passing train. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who faces re-election next year, says those found guilty will be punished. The Immigration Minister has told GB News it's wrong for migrants to demand better hotel accommodation while waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. It's after a protest was sparked in London by migrants being asked to sleep 4 to a room. Speaking to Camilla Tominey, Robert Jenrick said the government will never put their interests above the British public. He also said sharing a hotel room is necessary to get value for taxpayers' money.
Remember, these are migrants who have said they are destitute. They've said that they have absolutely nowhere to stay, no friends, no family, no money, and the taxpayer is stepping up and providing them with good quality accommodation and board and lodgings. And so, I think those migrants are wrong to protest and say that they deserve to have single bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms and so on. And I'm pleased to see that common sense seems to have prevailed in this case.
A Labour MP has told GB News victims are too scared to complain about sexual predators in Parliament. Charlotte Nichols told Camilla Tominey that harassment is baked into every single part of how Westminster operates. She also accused the Labour Party of choosing not to act on concerns raised about a number of colleagues over a very long period. Her comments come after she revealed being handed a list of 30 MPs she should avoid when first becoming an MP.
It's happened to me in meetings during the middle of the working day. I've had colleagues do things like inappropriate touching, their hand on your leg or on your back, or making comments towards you. And I'm someone that, as I said, within the hierarchy of Westminster, is relatively protected by virtue of being an MP. So how much worse it must be if you're someone who has less power in the institution, where you're more likely to experience it and even less able to speak out when it happens.
The new head of the CBI says she will fight for the organisation after it was rocked by allegations of sexual misconduct. Ray Newton-Smith, who was appointed Director General last month, faces a crunch vote on Tuesday, with members deciding if they have confidence in the business group. It's after leading companies including NatWest, MasterCard, ITV and AstraZeneca left the CBI in April, when the sexual harassment claims were first reported. More than a dozen women came forward with 2 separate allegations of rape. The Prime Minister is stressing the importance of a close and candid relationship with the US President ahead of his visit to the White House next week. Rishi Sunak is expected to attend a baseball game in Washington, D.C. prior to talks with Joe Biden. He'll also be meeting with business executives in an attempt to build closer economic ties between the two countries. More than 2,600 NHS staff in Scotland have taken time off work due to long COVID, with some off sick for more than 2 years. That's according to Freedom of Information requests by the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Well, the Scottish Government says it's investing £10 million into the Long COVID Support Fund. The Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims, and royal correspondent Michael Cole says it will be very unusual to see a royal on the witness stand.
A royal prince going into the witness box to give evidence in a very contentious case against Mirror Group newspapers. That hasn't happened ever since the 19th century. It is unprecedented. I mean, there's nothing in the British Constitution that says a royal prince cannot give evidence or cannot be called to be a witness.
And in the last few minutes, Dorset police have named the 17-year-old boy who died after getting into difficulty in the water off Bournemouth Beach as Joe Abus from Southampton. In a statement, the family paid tribute to him, saying they were heartbroken and devastated at the loss of a fabulous young man. A 12-year-old girl from Buckinghamshire also died after getting into difficulties on Wednesday. A sightseeing boat named the Dorset Belle has been impounded by police following the incident. You're up to date on GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. Welcome on board. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating and discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is GB News political commentator Nigel Nelson, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Now, still to come. Each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, I'm joined by a very special guest. Now, he's worked with the likes of Mel B and Sir Elton John. I wonder who that could be. Keep your thoughts coming. tvviews@gbnews.com. You'll find out whether you are right. Then on the way, the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you think that the migrants sharing hotel rooms is humane? What is your thoughts, seriously? Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has said that the country needs to reduce its reliance on hotels for housing migrants. Seems perfectly reasonable, and all of this comes as 40 migrants were offered spaces in a Pimlico hotel, yes, very posh part of London, quite expensive. I myself personally couldn't afford to live there, but they refused to stay after being asked to sleep 4 people in a room. So what are your thoughts? Get in touch at gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So it's fast approaching 9 minutes after 5 o'clock. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and it's now time for this week's Outside. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a very special guest. Now, he is one of the best connected individuals in UK entertainment. We've been working with the likes of Cher, Sir Elton John and Lorraine Kelly. He's also now the chairman of the Intertalent Rights Group, where he runs the show at transforming careers of talented individuals. I'm very pleased to say that I'm joined by Professor Jonathan Shaylett. He's a talent manager and chairman of the Intertalent Rights Group. Jonathan, thank you very much for coming in to see me.
Thank you for having me.
It's amazing. So, Jonathan, talk to me about you then, because, you know, I've written to you years ago, actually, Jonathan. I think you did reply, actually, to be fair.
I always try. It's a golden rule. Here's a lesson for anybody. Yeah. Always reply to emails or letters.
Yeah.
In the old days, it was letters, now it's emails. But it's really important to be courteous, because you never know who might be the next superstar who reaches out to you.
Well, that's true. And, well, Do you regret
and
it?
And here you are, your own TV show.
teasing you. But I once went to a talent manager, and actually it was Paul Dudridge who's on. He's one of my... he does the World View for America. And I used to write to everybody and everything. And I said to him, what should I do? I've written to hundreds of people. I wrote to all of them, and I'd followed the chain always. And he told me that the best agent is a self-agent. So that's what I did. How did you get into the profession of being an agent?
I was looking at that the other day because I'm just being honoured with a Lifetime Achievement Award in America, and I was thinking about my backstory and how it began. And I felt that probably it began back in the late 1960s when I met people like Lord Laurence Olivier, and then I went on to meet Princess Grace of Monaco.
Wow.
And people of that ilk, and that all happened because I was involved in theatre, and my grandmother was a patron of the arts. I used to work backstage at theatres and go backstage and meet lots of creative people. That got the bug, and the bug of Hollywood, because Hollywood people used to come to the theatre we ran in Sussex, and it was an extremely exciting time hearing those great Hollywood stories.
Wow. So you say you ran a theatre in Sussex. Tell me a little bit more about
Well, I didn't run a theatre. My family ran a theatre, and I kind of worked around the back of the stage, and I kind of did errands and got pocket money for not doing much, but it felt very important being sort of a young teenager. But it was a theatre where the greatest actor ever, Laurence Olivier, was the first director at Chichester, actually, Chichester Festival Theatre. And because he was the artistic director, he attracted great international stars to come and perform at this theatre. So I got to meet those great international stars. And in years to come, I used to go to the Royal National Theatre again and met great international stars. So I kind of had the buzz. And I remember one of the first concerts I ever saw, because the uniqueness of my company, Intertalent, is we cover all areas of entertainment. Most companies sort of specialise in one or two areas. We cover music, sport, social media, broadcasting, acting. Like last night, the Soap Awards, we have winners. We make shows with Discovery, we make shows with the BBC, we make shows with the ITV, NBC in America, Paramount Plus. We have big records around the world, as you've mentioned some of the names. Cher, Elton John we work with, for example. And the breadth is hugely exciting. And also, who you get to meet is really exciting.
Yeah.
You know, when seeing the news report just then, I've literally met kings, queens, popes and presidents, which I kind of pinch myself even now when I think about it, because it's a great privilege to meet these kinds of people. And it's also a great privilege, and this is why I think trust is so important, that these people trust you with their careers. And if you represent someone, their livelihood is in your hands because you're their ambassador to the world. So if their career falters or anything goes wrong and their earnings go down, that means they might not be able to pay their mortgage, their children's school fees, their alimony, the allowance to other members of their family, whatever they have money to spend on it. And I've got to make sure that continues. I've also got to make sure they're represented right to the world. In many ways, like I'm an ambassador for a country, but I'm an ambassador for an individual, because particularly now with the way the whole media goes nuts the whole time, you've got to work very hard at protecting clients' reputations who very easily can eschew away from what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve.
Especially with the digital era. So literally nothing is deleted. Even if you said something years and years and years ago, people can bring these things out and affect your career.
Well, the problem with the digital era is when you just had print, newspapers thought about what they printed because they weren't true. There could be legal action, it could be very expensive. But online, people print anything. And of course, what a lot of people do is they go anonymous and say things online about people, and then the story becomes the truth. Even if it's not the truth in the beginning, because it's down in the hemisphere, it then becomes a truth, which is never a truth in the beginning. So it's very difficult to manage social media.
Well, Eamon did make a quote, which he said, if you don't challenge a lie, it becomes the truth.
Eamon's absolutely right.
He's spot on, isn't it? If you do not challenge that lie, that becomes your truth. Who was the first person that you took on? Who was your first client then?
I mean, the very first client I took on, who wasn't even known, it was a singer called Matt Mudd. But through this young man, I learned how the record industry worked. And then off the back of Matt Mudd, I met other people. And then the big opportunity that took me globally was I rediscovered an old American musician that led me to work with Sir George Beatles Martin, the guy who produced the Beatles, who signed them to EMI Records. And that led to Elton John, Cher, Sting, Carly Simon, a whole number of international stars that saw me at Carnegie Hall, New York, one evening. In fact, the night before this concert, I was at a dinner party celebrating the concert the next day, and this concert was arranged by Sting and his wife. It used to be an annual fundraiser for the Sting's Rainforest Foundation. And this is the dinner party, lit guest list, and it's a table probably no bigger than this. Obviously, I was there. Elton John, Sting, Pavarotti, Whitney Houston. Those are the ones I remember.
You must, like you said, you must pinch yourself and think, crikey, I'm surrounded by these absolute legends.
Yes, but ultimately, though, these legends might be legends to the world in terms of their stardom, but the ones that get to the top and stay there are really hard workers, are very serious about their work. And I mean, I remember, for example, recording Elton John with orchestras. Some of the young musicians turned up late, they weren't prepared. Elton came early, he'd rehearsed what he was doing, so as the clock started ticking with the orchestra present. You have to pay an orchestra whatever time you start. You have to pay them for the waiting time if you keep them waiting. But Elton knew that, and he literally had spent days and days rehearsing the music. And I later found out from his driver, to ensure Elton was on time, and a lot of stars are late, as you probably know, to make sure Elton was on time, his driver had gone round there the day before to check the traffic to make sure he knew the way and would not be late. Yeah,
And do you think that a lot of the biggest stars are actually really nice people? Because, you know, sometimes you see someone and you think, oh, they're amazing, and then you actually meet them and it's such a disappointment. In your view, most of the biggest stars are actually really good people, because I think if you're not nice to people, then in the end it will come back and bite you.
I think you're absolutely right, and I don't think you remain at the top unless you're fundamentally a nice person, because there are very few people who can't be replaced. So therefore, people don't like you, they'll look for a chance to bring you down. And I also think that when people say a star wasn't what I thought they were going to be, it's often the expectation, because normally a star becomes a star because of their talent, whatever it is, and you can love that talent. But then you build an expectation around that talent of what that person is or is not like. And people often are very different in the privacy of their own homes, with their own friends and their families, and they are in their public perception. So often, and also when you go to approach big stars, a lot of big stars are shy. It might be a strange thing to say, but you think they're massive extroverts because they go on a stage and perform to millions of people on television around the world. But actually talking to them one-on-one, they can often not be that good a conversationalist to strangers. So I think it's about expectation. It's also the way you approach people and approach them the right way. And if you go up to a star in a restaurant having dinner with their partner and their children, and they don't give you massive warmth back, perhaps you're being rude, interrupting them. So I think it's all about expectation, and it's also about the way you treat them as well, because big stars are all... Just because they're big stars doesn't mean to say you can interfere with them when they're off duty. And I think there's a way of approaching people and a way not to approach people.
If someone's watching or listening now and they're thinking, I'd love to get a talent agent, what would be the best route for them to do that? I mean, you know...
I think you've got to email the talent agents you think are right to represent you. What I would say is send some content, not writing an email saying, hello, I want to do this, means nothing. Because the truth is, give an example of what you're doing. And the great thing about YouTube is you can create a clip on your iPhone of yourself doing something. And if you send that in, you may get picked up, or if you want to be a broadcaster on radio of you speaking. But write in with a clip of you doing what you want to do. But the truth is, it's a high-risk, high-reward business. And that means most people don't succeed. Most people don't get to have an amazing career because there's simply too many people. So if you are going to try and be, if you like, in show business, in the talent space, and not go down a conventional career where you join a company with a qualification, you build yourself up, so you get an upward trajectory of your career and the income, which means a guaranteed life. For most people, that's the best way to proceed. Being talent in the public eye can be very lonely and very difficult, and very few are going to make it.
It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it, Jonathan.
And you're doing it very well.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And very briefly, tell us a bit about the award that you picked up. You're talking about an award.
I've had a few awards over the years. You know,
latest
one of the great awards was getting an OBE at Buckingham Palace. And it was actually, the best bit of it was my mother. It's my dear mother, who never really understood what I do and still doesn't. Because my sister was a school teacher and a brilliant school teacher. My mother understood that. But being a talent agent and creating the opportunities I do for people, to go to Buckingham Palace and get an OBE from my late Queen was a pretty awesome experience for her. But this particular award coming up next year, it's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award by someone in California, but it's not for me to say yet till they announce it. OK. Well, Jonathan Shelley, thank you so much for joining me. It's really good to talk to you. That is, of course, the fabulous Jonathan Shaylett. He's a talent manager and he's also a chairman of the Intertalent Rights Group. Well, this is GB News. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 19 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. In the next hour, we'll be doing the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, do you think migrants sharing hotel rooms is inhumane? The Comfort Inn in Pimlico was at the centre of the news this week as around 20 asylum seekers camped outside to protest the poor conditions of the hotel. We'll be discussing that next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's just gone 23 minutes after 5 o'clock. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's now time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you think that migrants sharing hotel rooms is humane? Now, a hotel in Pimlico has caved in to the demands over the unsafeness of 4-to-a-room policy. The staff have announced now only a maximum of 2 migrants will share a room. Now, this is in the Comfort Inn in Pimlico, which was at the centre of the news this week as around 20 asylum seekers camped outside to protest the poor conditions, despite the fact that they've probably come somewhere on a boat, although I know some of them were somewhere in Essex or something. They were in another hotel somewhere else. They said the conditions in the hotel were poor, but aren't these people lucky that they're being provided sanctuary? What do you think? And why are they all stuck here for years without actually being processed? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you think that the migrants sharing a hotel room is inhumane? So joining me to discuss that, Harjat Bangal. Also, he's an immigration lawyer. Jess Gill, host of Reasoned UK. Belinda Lucy, former Brexit Party and political commentator. And Matthew Stadland, broadcaster. Right, I'm going to start with you, Harjat. In terms of legality, surely the accommodation is perfectly legitimate and they should be thankful for it. Well, where do we stand legally with this?
There are certain standards that are expected. Same applies for prisons. Same applies for people who are detained. And if not acceptable, then the Home Office has to provide that. They're under an obligation. However, there's no compulsion. The migrants are more than welcome to find their own accommodation, but it won't be paid for by the public. So they can do that if they're not happy with the circumstances. But the Home Office is under an obligation if it's providing accommodation that's humane, that's ample, fit for habitation.
You sound like you had what I had the other week with my voice. It was terrible. It'll go there in time. In time, it takes a long time, though, I'll tell you that now. Right, let's go to Jess Gill, then. She's the host of Reasoned UK. Jess.
What's inhumane to me is that the taxpayer has to spend millions a day for these people to complain. Real, it's majority young men coming here and the standards aren't well enough. 4 to a room, that's a basic British holiday for a working class family. You know, students who are going travelling in hostels face worse conditions. To say that inhumane is absolutely ridiculous, Nana. Why are we funding these people who aren't even grateful? I'm sure it is way better than the supposedly wall-tall countries that they're coming from.
Well, you'd think. Belinda Lucy.
So, you know, I think that, you know, why are so many migrants appearing so ungrateful, so disrespectful to the British taxpayer? Why are they just appearing like they're entitled to everything? And I actually don't lay the blame entirely at their floor. I blame the British government for turning this country into a cash cow to the world, sending the message out that everyone can come here, you don't need documents, you can be a criminal. And even if you're not an asylum seeker, we'll pretend you are. You can all come. It's unlikely we'll deport you. That's the message that's being sent out. If the British government doesn't respect the British taxpayer, how can we expect migrants to do so? And, you know, it's not all about treaties, Nana. Japan is a signatory of the Refugee Convention, 1951. They accept a handful, on average under 100 refugees a year, because they have a strict definition of what a refugee is. The definition of a refugee in England now, thanks a lot to the Lib Left and a weak Tory government, is anyone and everyone who just wants to come here. It's an insult and abuse to the British taxpayer.
I think these ones may well be asylum seekers, though, just a slight different definition, but ultimately...
Well, they haven't had their claim processed yet, so they're not definitely asylum seekers. They're just they're majority from the safe country of France.
OK, fair enough. Let's go to Matthew Stadlen. That's a good point you make. Matthew.
Hi, hello, Nana. Hello, everyone. No, it's a bad point that Belinda makes. It's a nasty point as well. These people are asylum seekers. The reason that they haven't had their cases decided yet is because we've got an incompetent Conservative government that hasn't got a grip on this, keeps talking a big game and keeps failing. The waiting list to get your asylum claims seen through and processed is astonishingly, extraordinarily long. And while these people are languishing on this waiting list, why don't they work? Why don't they contribute? Why don't we allow them to contribute to the economy, to pay some sort of dividend, to pay taxes to this country, to fill the million jobs that there's a huge gap in our market because people don't want to do those jobs. So instead of the nastiness, instead of mocking people who are fleeing places like Iran, places like Iraq, places like Syria, where there's a nasty dictator still, and don't forget Iraq, we invaded Iraq, and Britain invaded Iraq. But about 2003. Let's have a bit of humanity. 4 to a room. I've been backpacking around the world. I spent, 800 quid in 9 weeks in South America when I was 19. That's one thing. But to be languishing 4 fully fledged adults, 4 to a room, month after month after month is disgusting.
Interesting. So you'd give them a job as well. So you're going to make it a bigger draw for people to come here as well to fill the gap. And then, sorry, I listened to you. So you'd give them a job to make it even more. People will think, oh, great, I can get a job. And you think that 4 to a room is too much and it's not right. Listen, I actually think that 4 to a room is pretty decent, especially if people are paying for it. And I certainly wouldn't be chucking out jobs, because what about the people who are coming here legally and who have gone through the visa process and had to prove that they're, they have the qualifications for the job they're going for, and they've had to do everything, and their cost, they have to pay everything themselves. I mean, I'm just not buying it. Harjap, though, you were shaking your head when he said that. Were you OK to talk?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're not going to let these people work, so you're going to give them £9 a week. They're gonna be working somewhere. If not at car washes, they're gonna be working cash in hand somewhere. If you can let them work, give them insurance numbers, you can track where they are. Because believe me, you try missing a tax return and you see how HMRC tax track you down with 50 letters, right? Right. So instead of spending 6 million a day on them, why don't we let them work and let them pay tax? We wouldn't need hotels. We wouldn't need to pay any money. And why don't we use that 6 million to tell the Home Office to process these claims quicker? Why does it take 2 years to process an asylum claim? Some of those guys sleeping on the street there today have been waiting 1 year for a decision. That's like me saying to you, Nana, you can sit your A-levels, but you're not going to get your results for 2 years. So you can't go uni, and in the meantime, you're left hanging, basically. Or you can pass your driving test, you can sit your driving test, but you can't start, you're not going to get a result for 2 years. How are you supposed to get to work in the meantime? So let them work until they're, and make the processing faster. That is not their fault. It's not their fault that the Home Office can't do their job.
Nobody's saying that the Home Office, well, that's true. The civil servants, I'm not impressed with them at all. But listen, let's face it. Look, if you do that, then it's more of a draw. And as you said about me doing my A-levels, well, if I was in another country, I would have to fill in an application, try and get a visa. This could take time. So doing it the legal way would take time, and I'd have to wait for it and probably pay for it. Doing it the other round, I think, is just a draw. Jess, do you think that Matthew makes a good point that we should actually be giving them jobs?
I'm very worried that it would be another pull factor. I think the reason why it's taking so long is because there's so many applications, because so many people are coming here. You know, in 2010, I'm sure the Conservatives said they wanted 100,000 legal immigrants. Now we're almost having that with illegal immigrants. It's completely insane. And this idea that, you know, these are the most vulnerable who need our help, these are all young men. They're not the most vulnerable. They're, you know, why are they coming over? Why isn't it women and children who, you know, pitched on the pro-asylum seeker, pro-illegal immigrant campaigns? You know, it's always women and children, but in reality, it's young men who are able to work.
Belinda.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't buy the whole we have to be nice to everyone who comes here on boats because it's humane. The most humane thing to do in terms of asylum is to go straight to the camps and get the most persecuted and at-risk people and give them shelter instead of redefining what a refugee is just to mean anyone escaping poverty, which completely erodes the trust between the British taxpayer and the asylum seeker, and it doesn't help genuine refugees at all. And if I was fleeing for my life, I would be grateful for a roof over my head and some food to eat. And the point was very well made. It's an incredibly sexist system. These young, healthy men who pay 5,000 quid to the human traffickers to get over here. There are very few women and children. They're all stuck in camps. These men should be protecting their women and children back at home. And we should be concentrating on helping genuine refugees with documents who we know who they are. We even rejected Asia Bibi, the persecuted Pakistani Christian. We rejected her because we didn't want to upset the Islamists in this country, and yet we open the doors to people we don't know who they are we don't know where they come from. We have to have a strict policy that helps the genuine refugees and respects the British taxpayer. That's humane.
Matthew, I'm going to give you the last 20 seconds, literally 20 seconds, because I've got to go to the news. Matthew.
My dog's come for a cuddle because he doesn't like these views either. 2 quick points. One is the vast majority, or certainly the majority of people who seek asylum in this way in Britain are given asylum status. Why? Because they're genuine. And the second thing is go to another European country and find out how many asylum seekers they take. You'll find that they take a lot more than us in some cases.
Thank you for that, Matt. Well, to be honest with you, some of those countries are a lot bigger. So let's see. So from the top, Jess, is it inhumane, the sharing of the room? Yes or no? Inhumane, yes or no? No, it's not. Harjep, inhumane, yes or no?
They should meet the safety standards.
So is it inhumane? Inhumane? Is it inhumane then, the 4 rooms? 4 people in 1 room?
Asking them to share for a month is not inhumane. Asking them to share for 2 years is.
Belinda, yes or no?
If you're escaping war and risk of death, no, you should be grateful.
OK, and finally, Matt, I know your answer. No need to answer. Of course it is. All right, Matt Stadland, thank you very much. Jess Gill, thank you so much. Harjep and also Belinda and Lucy. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you for your views. So those are their views. What are yours? gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We'll continue with our great British debate. I'm asking, do you think migrants sharing hotel rooms is humane? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's go to Bethany Elsey with your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Here's your latest from the GB newsroom at 5:30. In the last hour, Dorset police have named the 17-year-old boy who died after getting into difficulty in the water off Bournemouth Beach on Wednesday. Joe Abus from Southampton died after being pulled from the sea. In a statement, his family said they were heartbroken and devastated, describing him as a fabulous young man. A 12-year-old girl named in reports as Suna Khan from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire also died in the incident, which involved 10 swimmers. A sightseeing boat named the Dorset Belle has been impounded by police. A man has been charged after allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final, which appeared to have an offensive reference to the Hillsborough disaster. 33-year-old James White from Warwickshire has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He's expected to appear at Wilton Magistrates Court next week. 97 Liverpool fans died in 1989 at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield. The Immigration Minister has told GB News it's wrong for migrants to demand better hotel accommodation while waiting for their asylum claims to be processed. It's after a protest was sparked in London by migrants being asked to sleep 4 to a room. Speaking to Camilla Tominey, Robert Jenrick said sharing hotel rooms is necessary to get value for taxpayers' money. Indian authorities say a signal problem was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. That's as the number of people who've been killed in the accident has been revised down to 275. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passenger train. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Bethany. Well, listen, on the way here on GB News, we'll be discussing Holly Willoughby. Should she return to the coach, as Eamon would say? Do you think so? She's going to be there tomorrow for this morning, but should she really just move on? Perhaps it would be better. And then on the way for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you think that migrants sharing a hotel room is inhumane? Don't go anywhere. We'll be discussing that next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Britain's news channel.
So it's coming up to 41 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. We've only got 20 minutes left, but there is still so much more here on GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's now time, though, for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you think migrants sharing hotel rooms is inhumane? And now a hotel in Pimlico has caved into the demands over the unsafeness of a 4-to-a-room policy. The staff have announced now only a maximum of 2 migrants will share. Now, the Comfort Inn in Pimlico, which is one of the most expensive parts of London, just so you know, was at the centre of the news this week as around 20 asylum seekers camped outside to protest the poor conditions. But aren't these people lucky that we're providing sanctuary for them all at the expense of the taxpayer? I'm astounded that it would be in Pimlico. I thought they may have picked somewhere that was slightly more cost-effective. But if you went to rent a room in Pimlico, you'd be paying at least £100 a night if it's a hotel room. So for the Great British Debate this hour, and that's a generous estimate, I'm asking, do you think migrants sharing rooms are humane? Let's see what my panel make of that. Broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. I don't know who to go with first. I'll go with Danny. Is it inhumane? 4 people in a room?
I think for a long period of time. I wouldn't like to spend months in a very small room with 3 other fellas who are passing wind and snoring all night. And I think that there is an element of inhumanity. The definition of inhumane is lacking compassion. So are we lacking compassion putting 4 lads in the same room? Well, we're not, because we have limited space. There's not an infinite amount of hotel rooms. There's a finite amount. So is that inhumane? Well, I think we need to accept that we can only do what we can do with the resources we have. And so if that means that 4 strangers, 4 men, are sharing in a small room, then unfortunately that's the way it's got to be. I think what's unhelpful is the complete intransigence and the polarisation and the lack of objectivity with some of your panellists there, Nana. I think we need to accept that a lot of people know what to say when they're being interviewed to see whether they're really fleeing persecution. People are trained and they're coached. I remember having a car wash in Birmingham, and I was talking to the guy who was an Iraqi lad who fled Iraq with the second invasion. And I said, so you must be a Shia, because Saddam Hussein was persecuting the Shias. He goes, no, I'm a Sunni. So what he did, he took advantage of hundreds of thousands of people displaced and knew what to say in order to get British citizenship. And we need to accept. So when I really admire Matthew, but I think it would be helpful if he would accept that they're not all, they're asylum seekers, they have that status, but they do usually some of them do indeed play the system. And I think people on the other side of the argument should be more compassionate to that situation as well. There's a lack of objectivity. It's polarising. It's unhelpful.
Nigel?
Yeah, I agree with Danny on that. It certainly is. The whole debate's become polarised. And on the specific issue there, no, it's not inhumane to ask people to share a room. Yes, it is to share a small 2-metre room with just 2 bunk beds in it and put 4 people in there. That certainly is wrong. And the answer to the whole thing is to actually get the asylum backlog, the 175,000 people in the backlog, cleared. That way we can actually move forward.
But what's taking them so long? I mean, they're being paid in the Home Office pretty decent wages. A lot of them not coming into the office to do the job. I'm not quite sure why they Why is it like that? Why is it so faceless that no one will come forward and explain why they're taking so long?
Because they haven't got enough people.
Well, what is involved in processing? Then surely they can change the process. That's what you do. If something isn't working, that's not working. The long-winded process of processing isn't working.
Well, it's not, because we've got this huge backlog. But the whole point about processing is you've got to actually find out whether you're dealing with a genuine asylum seeker or the people that you're talking about who might play the system. So they would be economic migrants.
Yes.
So if it's somebody who's a genuine asylum seeker with a genuine claim, then they should be allowed to stay. The problem, obviously, is trying to work out with people who have no papers because they've fled war or persecution or whatever at the last minute. They haven't got passports with them. So it does take a bit of time to be able to work it out. But the more people doing that job, the quicker we can get rid of the backlog.
But most people get through, so they might as well just do some sort of amnesty to hurry up with it, because literally 98% of them are going to get asylum. So... I don't think that's a good thing.
It depends where they come from about who actually will get that. But I mean, on that basis, we'd have taken all the Albanians who came in last year.
If you're Albanian, we've already got to deal with that. But
I've never heard a compelling and convincing argument to refute the fact that, generally speaking, these are young men and that they're fleeing persecution without their family, without their sisters, without their mums and their dads. And why aren't they looking after those parents? And I've not heard a compelling argument that's made me think, well, do you know what? Now I understand why there's a dinghy with 60 young lads on it.
Who've paid about 20, some of them up to 20 grand to get here.
It's the economic migrants. And I think if people would accept that and that there is a lot of hoodwinking to the system, then maybe there'd be common ground and people like Belinda could find more common ground with people like Matthew.
Because the only thing is, I don't like the fact that those people who've come via dinghy are getting this kind of treatment. I think ultimately, if you come by dinghy, they need to stop that particular channel of coming to this country in that way, because it's dangerous and a lot of people are profiteering. So, if they could improve the safe and legal routes, although they literally need to apply to be a student and you can get in, to be fair, because we've let so many people in from all over the world anyway. But I would say that they just need to improve the routes that people...
But there are no safe and legal routes unless you're a Ukrainian, a Hong Konger or an Afghan. And so if you come from somewhere like Syria, from Iraq, you haven't got a safe and legal route to get here. You're absolutely right. That's the answer. And so what you need to do is make sure they don't have to claim asylum on the British shoreline.
Exactly. Why don't they use the embassies or something in those countries? I'm not getting why they don't do that.
They could do that, or you could do something like the Syrian resettlement plan that we did so successfully. That was done from the refugee camps, and they had to come from there.
Well, let's see what they've got to say, because the show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 4 of you. Right, let's go to David Balm in Watford. David, what do you think? Are we being inhumane?
Hello, Nana. To a degree, no. But I think what we have to start accepting that 2/3 of those claiming to be refugees asylum are choosing to spend thousands of pounds listening to gangmasters who ship them into the UK, promising them a land of milk and honey. And quite rightly, when they get here and they're shoved into a hotel 4 to a room, that's not what they've been sold. That's not and they're quite rightly angry about it. We have to stop accepting. People have to understand these are not refugees. Now, my mother's family came from Germany in 1933 because of persecution.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between persecution and economic choice.
Well, OK, thank you for that. Let's go to Miranda Richardson. Not the Miranda Richardson, but Miranda Richardson. She's there in Northamptonshire. Miranda, what do you think?
Good afternoon. You know, again, I quite agree with what Danny said. You know, in order to be inhumane, you've got to lack compassion, and that isn't something we do. And certainly as a nation, we don't lack compassion. I think where do you start? Do you start with the gang lords that are charging these people to get here? Do we start with the Home Office and how quick they're able to process these asylum applications? You know, do we look at the fact that if you watch the interview, and I saw it yesterday with the young man outside the Pimlico Hotel, that they'd actually been already moved from a larger hotel with better facilities somewhere else into central London. Now, central London is busy enough at the best of times. So actually, you know, what are we doing? We're flooding areas that can't even cope with the people that are in them existing and living, let alone trying to house more people in order to give them somewhere while trying to remain compassionate to their needs. It's like a hamster wheel.
It is a bit, isn't it? A hamster wheel. What do you think, Brian Dugan? Is it like a hamster wheel? You're there in Solihull.
Yeah, I mean, Nana, I think I agree with a lot of what Miranda said and what Danny said earlier. And there is a real polarisation, as Danny said, to the argument. It's not so much that is it humane, is it inhumane? Listen, even the hotel itself has accepted that it was wrong because they've now shifted from 4 sharing the room to 2. Look, as you said as well, and this is really important, there's a backlog, and that needs to be addressed. And we've got to find a solution to that. That is the problem. That's the nub of the problem now.
Yeah, true. And Stephanie, you've got about 30 seconds. He ate up all your time. Quickly, go for it.
Good afternoon, Nana. No, I agree with everyone. I don't think it's inhumane. I think if it's risk assessed, it's fine. We can house him temporary. You need to understand it's only temporary accommodation. At the moment, it's costing the country and the taxpayer up to 7 million a day for hotel accommodation, and not talking about the billions that it costs. So if it's a way to reduce costs as well as reduce the backlog, I think we should continue allowing them to share.
All right, yeah, absolutely. And I'd probably split hairs and go for 3 in a room rather than 4. Right, thank you very much, Stephanie. Good to talk to you. Brian Dugan, Miranda Richardson, also David Balm. They're my great British voices now. Today I've been asking, should migrants... are we being inhumane? Lots of you have been getting in touch. Nigel says, I wonder if these people who are ungrateful for having to share a room with 3 others complained about the criminal traffickers when they had to share an unsafe dinghy with dozens. Good point. Peter says the migrants' complaints are absolute rubbish. When I was in my 20s with a family, I had to work away from home, regularly slept in a room with other men that I didn't know with a toilet on the landing. No shower. If they're desperate, you'll take what you can get. Bernard said, it seems the beggars can't be choosers. There are millions of British residents sleeping 4 to 5 in a room. These migrants are previously living in tents in France with no help whatsoever. And Mowena says, no, I don't think the migrants are hard done by when working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. I shared a bedroom with 3 others, none of whom I knew beforehand. Then, as a student teacher, I shared a room with 2 others. I don't know. How dare they make such demands? Many former soldiers would love a room rather than the streets. Absolutely. Right, well, listen, great thoughts. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Right now, for Time for Supplement Sunday, I'm going to discuss some of the top stories. Let's go with you, Nigel. Let's start with you and your story. Nigel.
Yes, indeed. It's the Taliban have unveiled their first supercar. And this has been made by Afghan engineers. And what they've done is they've collected a load of bits that have come from left behind by NATO, by US troops and so on. So the bits of helicopters, bits of old
Do
fridges.
we have a picture of it?
And we should have a picture of it. I do hope so.
Oh, we don't. That's such a shame. I want to see it.
It's called the Helmet. It looks fabulous, by the way, for anyone listening on radio. Question is a decent title. How about the Taliban Charabanc?
Love it. Also, Danny Kenny, your story.
This is a great story, but for all the wrong reasons. A guy on a cruise in the middle of the ocean goes to the doctor. He's got a bit of sciatica or something in his leg. The doctor misdiagnoses it as some sort of potential blood poisoning, and by the captain's orders, he is winched by the Coast Guard, taken to the nearest hospital, and in the end, it was just a little bit of sciatica. But the captain can't take chances in case he dies on the ship.
No.
Not the Love Boat, was it?
No, it wasn't the Love Boat, of course. Oh, let's quickly onto my story, and this was about Mizzy. He's that TikToker that people keep putting him on TV. His mum says, get a job, for God's sake. I mean, what do you think about this Mizzy guy? He keeps appearing on things. We've got about 10 seconds.
I think he's a div.
Well done.
That's Scouse for idiot.
Yeah, what do you think?
I haven't got any Scouse for idiot, I'm afraid, so I'll go with Danny.
I'm quite annoyed that the BBC gave him any sort of platform to do that, and also a couple of others did that as well. Well, listen, on today's show, I've been asking, do you think migrants sharing a hotel room is inhumane? And according to our Twitter poll, 81% of you say yes, 19% of you say no. I've got to say a huge thank you to my fabulous panel. GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you very much. And also to Danny Kelly. He's a journalist and broadcaster. Thanks so much, Danny.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to you at home for your company as well. I'll be back next Saturday at the usual time of 3 o'clock. Be there or be square. Don't forget, Free Speech Nation is on after this. I'll leave you with the weather. I don't know who's on after. Was it Gloria de Piero?
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the next few days, it stays fine and settled, but there are signs of something a little hotter and more humid on the way to end the week. But at the moment, high pressure is in charge of our weather, keeping it settled. This low pressure moves towards us, allowing a southerly airstream to develop towards next weekend, increasing risk of some heavy showers. A fine end to Sunday. We are seeing some low cloud across eastern areas push its way inland as we move overnight tonight. Thick enough for the odd spot of drizzle. Clearest skies holding on across western parts of the UK, and under those clear skies, temperatures could dip to mid to low single figures, holding up in the east, where it is a grey start to Monday morning. Low cloud also affecting Midlands, perhaps even eastern parts of Wales. But through the morning and into the afternoon, we should see that low cloud lift and break back towards the eastern coast, where it will stay quite grey for much of the day. Whilst much of the country will have a fine day, plenty of sunny spells and temperatures lifting into the low 20s. Still chilly along eastern coast with that northeasterly breeze here. On Monday evening, we've got plenty of sunshine before dusk, and then as we head towards midnight and overnight, we see the low cloud pushing.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist,